funds required for debts that are actually maturing now, there is going to be need to restructure the debts and to talk to the various lenders about this.
The National Treasury projects that the fiscal deficit inclusive of grants would be at 846.1 billion shillings, which is 6% of GDP in this year's budget. Regina Manyara reporting for Prime Edition.
And the last 10 years saw an increase in allocation towards several infrastructural projects year on year in a bid to spur economic growth and improve service delivery. The Jubilee administration has been banking on infrastructure projects as a multiplier effect for economic growth. We track the projects, their capital injections and impact of budgetary allocations towards them in the last 10 years.
Kenya's investment in infrastructure stands at 6.5% of GDP per annum. It is reported that the country's infrastructure quality was also at 53.6, with 0 being the worst and 100 being the best in the scale.
Infrastructure, wengine wanasema munafanya mambo haya kwa nini? Twayafanya kwa sababu bila infrastructure huwezi inua hali ya maisha ya wananchi. Huwezi upate kazi. Tukisema tunataka stima, twasema tunataka stima sio kwa sababu watu wanakula stima, lakini hiyo stima inasaidia kijana kule kijijini kuanza kazi yake ya jua kali, kuanza kazi yake ya welding kidogo hapo, kuhakikisha wameweka barafu maziwa yake isiharibike. So infrastructure is important.
In the 2014-2015 budget, 255.9 billion shillings was allocated for energy, infrastructure and ICT, which accounted for 14.5% of the consolidated national government budget in that period. In the 2015-2016 budget, Kenya apportioned over 330 billion to capital projects, infrastructure and energy. The government significantly increased its allocation to energy projects from 40 billion in 2015-2016 to 120 billion in 2016-2017. In the financial year 2017-2018, the infrastructure budgetary allocation of 285 billion represented approximately 12% of the government's total expenditure. The 2017-2018 fiscal budget had also focused on attracting investments to special economic zones by providing tax incentives. In the financial year 2018-2019, the budgetary allocation for oil and gas was similar to the previous year. In the financial year 2019-2020, the budget was anchored on the government's focus on creating jobs. In the financial year 2019-2020 budget, Treasury allocated 18.8 billion to housing. The 2020-2021 budget statement was presented against a backdrop of an economy battling with the novel coronavirus, food security threats from locust invasions, and floods ravaging the country. In the year, 172.4 billion was allocated towards roads and bridges. The budgetary allocation towards this infrastructure was, however, reduced by 4.7% from 180.9 billion shillings in the financial year 2019-2020. In the 2021-2022 budget, analysts say fiscal balance is the key to maintaining macroeconomic stability, inspiring growth and reducing the pace of growth of public debt.
We need to think very seriously about what expenses will have to be cut. We are no longer discussing about what to do. We now must discuss what to cut.
Experts say prudent financial management is called to achieve this objective.
Now prepare for tougher times ahead. This is the message from tax and accounting experts from PKF who project that the government is likely to increase taxes to finance this year's budget, estimated at 3.3 trillion shillings that would be read today. According to PKF Tax Director James Mulili, Kenyans should brace for increased taxes on financial services, and the government is likely to expand the products that are previously exempted from tax.
Ahead of the presentation of the 2022-2023 financial year budget statement by National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Okur Yatani on Thursday this week, tax and accounting experts from PKF project higher taxes to finance the 3.3 trillion shillings budget.
We are looking at a tax system that is not consistent. The reason we have these discussions every year is because we have to predict what to expect. And that shouldn't really be the situation. The government should come up with a tax policy that is consistent. We should always know every budget cycle, this is what we expect to see. We should be looking at a tax policy system that is certain.
Inflation is moving up. From February it was 5.1%. It's now moved up to around 6.3% in April, and we expect it to still move higher up with fuel costs and other effects on raw material inputs.
They say variables like the rising cost of living, uncertainty around the elections, the Russia-Ukraine war and global supply chain disruptions could stifle the economy and affect tax collection.
We are seeing a lot of target on anything that would net taxes from a customs point of view, import VAT, the excise duty, as well as all the other levies that come with importation. We obviously expect to see an adjustment to the products that attract excise duty. We expect to see a reclassification of some of the items that are either VAT exempt or VAT zero rated. And from a corporate income tax perspective, we just want to see the movement. What are some of these other changes that could be implemented to generate more taxes?
To finance the budget, Mulili projects that the National Treasury is likely to broaden or increase levies on financial services as well as target luxurious commodities. The National Treasury is also likely to review the list or taxes for goods and services.
The taxation around petroleum products is one of the areas that tax experts are going to be looking at as Treasury presents its proposed budget for the financial year 2022-2023 come Thursday. The 3.3 trillion shillings budget. Financing it is going to be a tall order, and tax experts are looking at, the financial services sector as well as a review of, excise duty and VATable goods as one of the ways that Treasury will be looking at to finance that budget.
Regina Manyara reporting for Prime Edition.
Well, we shall be breaking down just what those numbers mean to you. Now, National Treasury CS Ukur Yatani is expected to read this year's budget 2 months earlier than the usual time. Kenya wrote to the East Africa community to present her budget earlier. Kenya's budget reading has been fast-tracked to pave way for timely approval of the estimates by legislators before the 12th Parliament is dissolved on 10th of June ahead of the election polls.
As has been the norm, finance ministers in the East African community present their respective countries' national budgets on the second Thursday of June every year. This year, it is supposed to be on the 9th of June. The case is, however, different for Kenya, that has revised the budget calendar and is presenting the budget 2 months earlier. The main reason is the August election, since the budget, or in legislative terms, the Finance Bill 2022, needs to be passed and signed into law in good time. This is because the term of the 12th Parliament officially expires on 10th of June, a day after other EAC member states present their national budget. Kenya's budget is being done as per the Public Financial Management Act that recommends fast-tracking of processes to ensure that government services are not interrupted during the electioneering period, as well as finance the general election and a possible presidential runoff. Therefore, debate and passage of the Finance Bill 2022 by lawmakers and subsequent signing into law by President Uhuru Kenyatta will authorize the executive, legislature and the judiciary to withdraw cash from the public coffers for day-to-day running of the government programs, as well as for KRA to collect taxes to finance the budget.
How well, for example, are these budget estimates and the budget we read on Thursday reflective of the next administration? And from what we can foresee is that we're going to get a clearer picture of the priorities of this government, of the next government, when the supplementary budget is being read.
One, there's the fact that the government still has to continue collecting the taxes.
The other two bills linked to the budget are the Division of Revenue Bill and the Budget and Appropriation Bill, which the law requires that they are tabled in Parliament 2 months before the budget is read.
Well, today is the budget day and we are following up on just what is happening across the country. In Mombasa, Michael Mwandiga is standing by, but here in Nairobi, where the budget will be read in Parliament, John Jacob Curia is standing by to give us what the latest is and just how the ground looks like. Jacob.
Thank you very much, Regina Manyara Gitao, back at Broadcasting House. Indeed. And indeed, we're coming to you live from Parliament buildings. Today, CS Ukur Yatani reads the 3.3 trillion budget, the very last under President Uhuru Kenyatta and the last under his reign as the Cabinet Secretary Treasury. And it will be quite an interesting time knowing that this budget is supposed to take this administration throughout the remaining month and then the incoming administration up to the month of June 2023. So this is a budget for the outgoing administration and the incoming administration, and it comes at a very critical time. Why this budget had to be done in the month of April is because by June operations in Parliament will be paralyzed, obviously because of campaigns, and there's quite a number of MPs who are actually seeking re-election or are seeking other elected positions in the country. So what will happen generally is a situation where operations in Parliament will be paralyzed for the entire time from the month of June. And that what also means is that there will be no operations inside Parliament. Therefore, they will not be able to discuss the finance bill. And therefore, it was reasonable that this budget comes to this House at this point so that they get enough time to discuss through the finance bill, the appropriations bill, so that to ensure that government is running throughout the time of the elections and transition. It's also quite important. Some of the things that we'll be looking out for is the provision of the monies that go towards elections, because the elections are in August. It will be quite a budget, going towards the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, as well as the security apparatus in the country, to ensure that there is enough security for the ones that are providing security in the country during this very time of the election. So it will be quite an interesting time around this time as Ukur Yatani makes his way to Parliament buildings to deliver this 3.3 trillion budget, and the proposals therein in terms of taxation, relief for who, that will be the interesting time. And again, this budget is coming at a time when the cost of living is up too high. The prices of basic commodities is way too high. The fuel prices way too high. Again, also bearing in mind that there is a shortage, whether it is artificial or not, is also a very interesting question. But you remember the president signed a release of 34 billion to the dealers of petroleum products. So again, but yet the effect is yet to be felt by motorists and people who are using fuel. So this budget comes at a critical time. One, because it is a budget of legacy. This is the time the President Uhuru Kenyatta is exiting. Much of the crux of the budget that President Uhuru Kenyatta has allocated this last 3-4 years has been towards the Big Four agenda. Will we see a replica of the same, where a lot of money is allocated to the Big Four agenda as President Uhuru Kenyatta prepares to exit? That will be the big question. But also there will be a chunk of money, allocated to the security sector as well as the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. There will also be probably a sizable amount of money going to the judiciary because of the petitions it will have to deal with throughout this time, and a sizable chunk again also going to the education sector, owing to the fact that we expect the transition to a junior secondary school, as well as the implementation of the building of classrooms for the junior secondary school. So this budget comes at a time of transition. It is for the outgoing administration and the incoming one, because this budget will run up until June 2023, but also a time when Kenyans are really bearing the brunt of very difficult times, very hard times in terms of the economic well-being because of the high cost of living, the rise in terms of the price of basic commodities, as well as the rise in the cost of fuel. So this is quite an interesting time. And once again, before I hand it over to you in studio, so that we get views from Mombasa and the rest of the team, is that at this very critical juncture, it is important to note why this budget is coming to Parliament in the month of April. Previously, it has come here either somewhere in the end of the month of May or somewhere in the beginning of June. But this time we are having it in the month of April because Parliament is considered naturally dissolved by the month of June because there will be no operations in Parliament. Even the Speaker of the House himself is seeking the presidency. So there will be no operations inside this House. So it's assumed a natural dissolution by the month of June because there will be no operations in the House. So in between now and June, Parliament is expected to debate the finance bill, the proposals therein, the taxation therein, as well as the appropriations bill. Something also that is very important is the fact that 22 governors are exiting. So as we talk about a legacy budget for President Uhuru Kenyatta, we're also talking about a legacy budget for about 22 governors who are exiting because of having served their second term. You're talking about Mombasa, Turkana, Samburu, Murang'a, some of these areas. About 22 governors are exiting, including Siaya, Homa Bay, and Migori. 22 governors are exiting. So also this is a legacy budget. It will also be interesting to see whether there will be a gradual increase of monies allocated to counties in this budget. What amount of money is going to counties in terms of completing the projects that are in counties? And of course, also, you have to factor in the aspect of transition because in these 22 counties, it is guaranteed there will be transition from one administration to the other. In some of these counties where governors are serving their first term, it is also guaranteed there could be a transition if the governor doesn't make it for a second term. So therefore, again, there has to be money allocated, particularly to go towards transition, as well as the induction of new MCAs, the induction of new MPs, the induction of new governors, and it will be a quite interesting budget today. 3.3 trillion shillings, what would I say? Belt up. Back to you, studio.
Thank you, John Jacob Kiria. They're just giving us a very detailed report, including the fact that the Speaker himself is seeking the presidency in the country. And of course, Parliament being dissolved by the 10th of June means this budget has to be read today. Well, we now head to Kisumu, where Wycliffe Okech is standing by to give us the latest and probably the views of Kenyans on what to expect in the budget. Wycliffe.
Pata full glass protector kwa 200 tu. Pia unaweza pata all phone accessories. Welcome to KBC Online. Get ordinary glass protector at 1. Get full glass protector at 2.
Well, Betty, today is all about the 3.31 budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023, and Kenyans are looking forward to what the CS for Treasury Ukur Yatani will be unveiling as part of that budget. And actually, we've been doing the coverage, pre-budget coverage, for the past 2 days, and one thing that is coming out clear is that Kenyans are expecting that the content of that budget will be one that will be directed towards curtailing, or rather will be one that will be addressing the high cost of living that has gotten Kenyans speak about the current government, and they are expecting the government, or rather the budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023 to address the price of the basic commodities. And just like that, we will be interacting with more Kenyans from this part of the country. We'll be talking to the ordinary people, the business people, and actually the chairperson of the Chamber of Commerce and Industries in this Western country, just to get what they expect in this budget ahead of its unveiling later on in the day. Betty, we will be keeping tabs and will bring our viewers up to date with all sorts of expectations from this country, from this side of the country. But for now, I hand it back to you so that you can get the expectations from other regions. Betty.
Well, that is Wycliffe Okech coming to us from Kisumu. Of course, he will be sampling the views of Kisumu residents on just what to expect in this year's budget. Kenyans complaining about the high cost of living. A number of issues have just worked against Kenyans, from COVID-19 impacting the economy, and now the Russia-Ukraine war and the impact it has had on Kenya's economy. Do tell us what you expect in the budget later in the day on Twitter, we are at KBC Channel 1. My personal Twitter handle is at Betty Kiptum. On Facebook, we are at KBC Channel 1 as well. Do tell us what your views are, what you expect, and just what you are feeling during this time as the budget for the year 2022-2023 is read later in the day. Now we want to take you to Mombasa City, where Michael Mandiga is standing by. Michael, just what are Kenyans expecting today, and what are they saying about the budget?
Well, good morning to you, Kipto. We are coming to you live from Mombasa. As we expect Treasury CS Mr. Ukur Yatan to present the 3.1 trillion shillings budget. There are so many expectations from the common Mwananchi taking into account the high cost of living. The high cost of living for now, they're just tightening the belt, but just being too difficult for them. But they expect that as the CS will be presenting that mega budget, that mega budget to be precise, they're expecting that the budget will look into account the high cost of living, basic commodities, and of course to ensure that whatever will be tabled is going to turn around and change the way things are. But from Mombasa County, we'll be keeping tabs to bring you up to speed. And of course, later I'll be joined by technology experts who will also be giving their input and expectations from this mega budget. You know, issues to do with cyber security and so many issues which they want also to put some input in this mega budget. That's all we have from Mombasa County. I'm in Shanzu, and I'll be back giving you up to date and keeping you up to speed with what will be happening here. Back to you, Kiptum.
That is Michael Mandiga coming to us from Mombasa City. And of course, those are our reporters there. I see Wycliffe Okech from Kisumu there will also be updating us in a little bit. We have John Jacob Kuria in Parliament. Nancy Okware is at the Treasury building, and we shall be giving you quite an update on matters the budget reading. But first, we take a quick break. When we come back, we shall be breaking the numbers. Stay with us.
Like you're surprised. You gave birth to him, Mom. In order to get married to me, he killed his wife with his own hands. And now, to get another woman, who knows what he's capable of?
Step aside! Why are you beating him? Who gave you the right to do that? Didn't I tell you? I truly love him. You kept saying that since you've decided to get a divorce with her, you'd cut all ties with her.
Divorce?
What did you say? You may just do some asking around.
Are you an aspiring candidate in the upcoming general elections? Do you want your agenda and manifesto to reach your voters effectively? At KBC, we have the most comprehensive and credible online platform that has profiles of all prospective candidates. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants and let Kenyans know more about you, your past achievements, your manifesto, and your development agenda once you get elected to office. What's more, the website is easy to navigate. We will create your profile, post pictures and short videos with your campaign messages at affordable hosting fees. Log on to www.kbc.co.ke/2022 aspirants today and establish your brand authority as we lead towards the forthcoming general elections.
Do you know if we just belay our cards very well, we will end up being millionaires?
You know you are the only fled that nimekuwaga very sure utanitoa kwa poverty. What is the business proposal?
And how can your mouth be your talent? Ngandagi, how can your face be your talent, Agatha?
Dad, look at me. Yes, we will know you, and that is a lot of knowing, yet we don't know who it is.
Come in, Neyawa. It helps to listen to yourself. Listen to yourself sometimes.
And then what in Julia? I am not lazy, I don't talk to myself.
I have realized that in this school, we don't do morning devotions at all.
Oh, that is because we are from different religion, Ma'alim.
Farah, we serve the same God.
Naitwa Jonte. Boy Chief.
Uko na miaka ngapi?
27 like 28. But sky 27, si ndio?
Do I know you?
Sure.
Wewe ni wewe uliyetaka ukaenda na miguu ukaenda hata ujulikani kwenye uliyetaka.
Come and give your mother a hug. He's humble. Or so she says. He comes from a humble background. I mean, what choice does he have?
Where were you? Where were you? Where were you when your son was...
It's not your fault.
Glenn.
We're already a family.
Kusema la kweli mimi sina la kusema. Na furahi tu sana sana sana.
Kwa nini tutakuwa tunahama kila wakati?
Haya yote yameletwa kwa sababu yako wewe mwenyewe na kufutana na Kate.
Kate, bado kesi inaendelea.
Huyo mtu aliyoko hapo ndio chanzo cha mimi kuwa na wazo hilo la kuiuza.
Hebu jiangalie jinsi ulivyo. Huoni hata aibu?
De traición.
You are the son of Leonardo del Rio.
Dios de dolor.
Lying heart.
Fue sembrando el veneno y la ambición.
Thank you for staying with KBC Channel 1. You are watching a special show, a special business show on Matters the Budget Day. We are breaking down the numbers for you today, the 3.3 trillion shillings. Just what does it mean for you? To give us this perspective is quite an able panel I have here with me. On my immediate right is Churchill Ogutu. He is an economist at IC Asset Managers. Christine Kahema is right next to him. She's the director of Alpha Tax and Business Advisory Services. as well as Michael Owor, a research fellow at the Global Center for Policy and Strategy. Welcome on set, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, let's just start right there. The 3.3 trillion shillings. What does it mean for you, Churchill?
Thanks for having me on the show. It's an increase from what the numbers in the current financial year. The current financial year is around 3.03 trillion. That is before the supplementary. With the supplementary, it's coming to around 3.1 trillion. So that's an increase of around 200 billion to 3.3 trillion. And these numbers obviously even excludes debt redemptions, which is around 751 billion. So if you include that, that's already 4 trillion. So on the expenditure side, that's the numbers. There's like a 2 trillion to the national government, 370 billion to the counties, and then a whopping 1.5 trillion as consolidated fund services. That's where the public debt servicing is also included in that number. So that's broadly the combination of this 3.3 trillion budget.
Christine, 3.3 trillion, what does it mean for you, especially on the tax front?
I can tell you it's definitely a balancing act for the CS because the 3.3 trillion has to be raised one way or another, but for the taxpayer they will definitely feel the impact. The Revenue Authority has to come up with ways to raise this amount because they've been given a target of 2.1 trillion, which is actually an increase from the last year's target, which was about 1.77 trillion. We've been seeing them meeting that target, but the tax, I can tell you, I always say they're the only ones who are making money during this season. It's definitely a difficult year for the government because in this election year, the KRA has to raise 2.1 trillion. We have elections and we know what comes with elections. There's an economic downturn to some extent. The issue of COVID, businesses are yet to recover from the pandemic, so it becomes very difficult. So the Revenue Authority has to come up with strategic ways in order to increase this. The common thing is always to increase taxes, but how much can you increase the tax? You can see businesses are hurting. Are they going to increase the tax base? Because if they focus on their normal Pareto principle, where they focus on 20% of the companies that generate 80% of the revenues, it will be difficult to hit this budget. Yes.
Quite a task there for the current government and the upcoming government.
You're right.
Michael, as we've just said, this budget will be used by both governments, largely by the transition government.
Yes.
So what does it mean, the 3.3 trillion for you?
It's the biggest budget ever in Kenya's history, if I'm to get that correctly. In a nutshell, a lot of people and organizations on tenterhooks because from the projections which have been given is that the government expenditure is increasing. At the same time, the revenue collection should also be increasing. So what does that mean? It means that there will be significant tax collection from individuals and also from the corporate. So it will be interesting hearing, especially from those who are more likely to be affected by this budget. But equally, spare a thought for Ambassador Yatani, who, along with all the other cabinet ministers for finance globally, this is not the best time to read any budget because the world economy is not as stable and predictable as it should be. Yes.
Right. Very good and interesting introductions there. Now, let's take it back a little bit. This is Uhuru Kenyatta's final year in office. When he started in 2013, the budget that was read at the time was 1.6 trillion. I mean, looking at that number now, you really cannot believe it, yeah? When you take it back to when we were celebrating when Kibaki, crossed over the trillion shilling mark, now we are at 3.3 trillion shillings. So let's look at the 10 years. Over the 10 years, just how has Kenya performed? I'll start with you, Christine.
It's interesting that you note that we had a 1.6 trillion budget then, and I think with the cost of government, it's kept increasing. And I always say that government expenditure and government structuring is very interesting. We always first come up with the expenditure, and then we look for the sources of revenue to fill in that expenditure. So that's why we are in this position where we are trying to see how do we fund a 3.3 trillion budget. So the economy has actually been recovering. We've seen an increase in some periods on the growth of the GDP. And the issue has been how much are we able to extract from that GDP tax collection. We call this the tax base or the tax to GDP ratio. How much has the GDP grown, and how much has the tax actually grown in tandem to that? Because that's the only way we can say that the economy is growing, when the government is able to get as much tax from the growing economy. That's been definitely a struggle. Our tax to GDP ratio is still at about 18 to 20%. It's been growing over the years, but in some years we've actually seen a dip. And this is because our main focus has been taxing the formal sector. Yeah, we need to also consider ways of taxing the informal sectors, because what happens is that when government is able to tax, it will be able to run its project, and in that way we'll be able to see sustainable growth. When businesses thrive, government will also get its fair share of taxes. So businesses have significantly been affected because they are not growing at the same pace as how much tax is being collected from the formal sector. So government, if we are to even see growth going forward, we really need to consider to expand this tax base so that we also focus on the informal sector. And you know, the informal sector actually contributes to about 60% of the country's GDP. That will be the only way to have the businesses currently paying taxes not to feel the real impact going forward on the tax. So with that, it's been a struggle for the 10 years. We've seen quite some good developments. I can actually, we are happy to see that. But there's definitely been revenue leakages, which have to be sealed, because it doesn't feel right when you as a taxpayer has to pay the taxes, but there are lots of opportunities for revenue leakage. If we can seal those, we would have definitely performed better. We would have focused on developmental expenditure, and that would have gotten us to a better place. Yes.
Churchill, for this budget that we are budgeting, or rather that will be read today, as Christine has put it, it is quite a tough time for the government. I mean, Ukur Yatani himself being in that position is tough enough. Is it healthy from an economic perspective? Is it healthy for a country to be in this situation?
Well, it's not the...
Because let me just look at it this way. If it was a business, sometimes people say Kenya would have been shut down. So please.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the context, just to simplify it, whereby, even as Christina said, we start from the expenditure side, and then we try to figure out how to finance these expenses. And that's not the way that a typical household will do. They do it the other way around. We are from probably your income, salary, or income from business, and then perhaps you can just fund a few things here and there from other external sources. But you find that that's where the debt is coming from, in the sense that each and every fiscal year there's that financing element. Either our revenues are not able to meet it, the targets that have been put are quite ambitious, so we now resort to increased borrowing over time, and also the nature of some of the capital expenditure that the government is getting itself into, which requires that dalliance from borrowing some funds. So we are in a tight position. And if I may circle back to the revenue issue, there's an increase of 300 billion from this financial year, 1.8 trillion to 2.1 trillion. Probably from policymakers' projections, they have estimated a nominal growth rate of 11%. By nominal growth rate, that is the numbers, GDP numbers in that year, using the currency for that particular year. So that's expected in the current financial year. Is expected, the nominal GDP is expected to be at 12.6 trillion. That is expected to go to 14 trillion. But the numbers that the growth numbers are in real terms. Now they are looking at it in terms of the numbers as at 2016, not at 2021 or 2022 years. So that's the difference. So they're looking at a nominal GDP growth of 10% in the next financial year. And that is where they're anchoring that probably that's where even the growth for the revenues, a large chunk of that 300 billion increase will be an organic growth they're assuming there'll be recovery in the economy, but that's not the case. Businesses are yet to recover. Probably people are not consuming as much as it was there before, and we expect also, in addition to that, there'll be proposals that will be contained in the finance bills, some new taxation measures, which will now increase the burden to the common person. So I think where Treasury is a tight balancing act. increase of revenues to try to match this rising expenditure, and yet the odds are stacked against them, against the reality of the current macroeconomic environment.
The reality is pretty grim.
Ugly.
You know, to say the least. The high cost of living Kenyans have been complaining about, I mean, it has skyrocketed over the past few months, because of the war in Russia and Ukraine and its trickle-down effect. So from a policy perspective, Michael, where will these taxes come from?
From taxes, of course. That's the most simple answer that I can give you. And this is actually supported by the budget policy statement. Estimations for what is supposed to be raised in this year and also in the subsequent 4 or 5 years. When you read that document, you will see that income tax is projected to increase along that period of time. VAT and also excise tax will also follow the same pattern. So the bigger conversation here is how are we going to finance those aspects? Now there are two ways of financing that if I'm in the position of decision makers. Is one, either increase the tax rate and hope that will be able to net you more income, or improve the operating environment so that you have more productivity, more businesses coming on board, employing more people, so that you have a wider tax pool to collect your revenues from. From what I am sitting and analyzing the situation, is that first of all, this is an election year. So the expectation is for the people who are in investment cycles, that is for the corporates and also the medium and small enterprises, it's a wait and see situation as we are, because we do not know what will happen during and after this election. So investments are likely to be dampened. The second issue we are also seeing is the issue of uncertainty, as you have correctly said, in the global market. So it is the interplay of these two factors that is affecting, in my perspective, the cost of living. You have the gradual increase in prices due to factors which mostly are beyond your control from the global sphere, but it's also because of the way the economy has been running, with a lot of infrastructure directing decisions rather than productivity of job creation opportunities, as it were. So we have fewer and fewer people having money in their pocket, while at the same time we have mega infrastructure. So there is little money by the household and individuals to be able to finance the growing expenditures that households are supposed to be dealing with in terms of buying food, oil, energy, and things like that. Yes.
When you talk now, that's the revenue that we've been talking about. There's the other side of it, the borrowing side of it. Of the 846 billion that is supposed to be borrowed, external borrowing is around 275 billion, and the local market is 570 billion. What does this mean for the Kenyan businesses? Let's just start there. Christine?
Okay, so maybe just before I address that question, I would like to build on that good question you asked about where will that tax come from. And the reason why this is the case is because you remember, like in the last financial year, KRA was mandated to raise 1.77 trillion, whereas 1.1 trillion was actually going into servicing the debt. So more than 50% of the revenue collections is actually going into servicing the debt. Now, when you look at the different taxes that we have in the country, our biggest challenge is the fact that we do not have a documented tax policy. So when you have a properly documented tax policy, and the CS actually in the last year's financial budget stated that that will be produced, it's actually currently under review, and we hope it will be out for public participation. It tells you why a tax is being introduced. And the national tax policy will really be helpful, because even for an investor, they'll be able to look back and see this is what is coming ahead. Now, the challenge without a national tax policy, it keeps us waiting. We don't know what's going to happen, And mainly, taxes will be raised either from indirect taxes or direct taxes. So as he said, it's expected that direct taxes may be touched from an income tax perspective, so you're looking at corporate taxes and PAYE. But what we've seen with most countries is that they're focusing a lot on indirect taxes. The reason why this is a case is because indirect taxes, the cost of collection is low. If I go to a supermarket and I buy bread or I buy milk, I will pay excise tax. If I go to a bar and I consume my drink, I'll pay excise tax. So it's usually easier to collect. Income taxes actually contribute to about 42%. So we have been predominantly focused on income taxes, but we are yet to see
cannot allow other women to come on the same space because she's getting different privileges from men. So akiona mwanamke ako like this is a competitor.
This being an election year, we have given an opportunity to women to express themselves and share their expectations during this critical moment in our country.
The issue of corruption and how it has impacted women and children in this country.
Create jobs for the informal sector, create jobs for the youth who leave the universities.
Hatutaki bora uongozi, tunataka uongozi bora.
Keep your heels, head and standards high. Dadas, coming soon.
Mimi naitwa Jonte. Boy wa Tiff.
Uko na miaka ngapi?
27 elekea 28. But sika 27, si ndio?
Do I know you?
Sure.
Wewe ni wewe uliyetaka ukaenda na miguu ukaenda hata ujulikani kwenye uliyetaka.
Come and give your mother a hug. He's humble, or so she says. He comes from a humble background. I mean, what choice does he have?
Where were you? Where were you? Where were you when your son was?
It's not your fault.
Glenn.
We're already a family.
Thank you for staying with us. This is the Legacy Budget Breakdown. We are breaking down those numbers for you. And of course, 3.3 trillion shillings is expected to be broken down for you by National Treasury CS Ukur Yatani later in the day in Parliament. And we just want to get your views. Our reporters are on the ground across the country. Timothy Kipnusu is in the capital, Nairobi Central Business District, and has quite a number of people lined up to just give us what they expect. Kipnusu? Well, we shall be getting to Kipnusu in a little bit, but remember that the financing of that particular 3.3 trillion shillings, 2.1 trillion is expected to be collected by the Kenya Revenue Authority, as well as of which 300 billion shillings will be, the government is expecting that in appropriation in aid, 47 billion shillings in grants, and 846 billion borrowing. Externally is 275 billion, the bigger chunk 570 billion shillings from the local market. The analysts here in studio are telling me that these will put up some pressure on the Kenyan market. The Kenyan commercial borrowing is quite expensive locally. Well, we shall be delving into what that means for the SMEs and just how they can access credit during this difficult time. But Kipnusu is now ready for us in the CBD of Nairobi. Kipnusu, what do you have for us?
A very good morning to you, Betty Kiptum there at the Broadcasting House. Yes, indeed, I'm coming to you live from the Central Business District, particularly at the Kencom, just to have a feel of from residents of this particular budget that will be read by Ukuru Yatani, that the Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury. Remember, it is happening at a time when Kenyans are undergoing through harsh economic times occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course at a time when this heated political temperature in the country, bearing in mind that it is just less than 5 months for Kenyans to go to the polls. And to understand what are some of the expectations, I'm joined by a gentleman here. A very good morning to you. Perhaps what are some of the expectations? The budget is being read by Ukuru Yatani. This year, we just like 4 or 5 months to the election. What are some of the things that you want this budget to address?
The most important thing in our country is the economy. Economy has gone down, and we need our CS to make sure at least the common food of the Kenyans should be reduced by a very big tax. Two, and I will want the CS to think how the president did in 2020, where he reduced all the tax, and the tax was 14%. So if at all they can take this charge so that all country or all Kenyans can be reduce the charge by 14%. It will be very good for Kenyans. So that it can go at a certain point whereby later on it will be reduced. Yeah, it will be hijacked.
Perhaps talk about the unemployment rate in the country. What are some of the things that you need the Cabinet Secretary to address in allocation of money to do with ensuring that the youth to the one are unemployed are being taken care of?
Most important, the youth are so many. What a town can do, the CS, he should make sure every youth can get a token to uplift themselves on the ground, because they are really suffering on the ground. They don't know what to do. They are staying in their houses. They don't know what to do in the houses. So if at all they could get some percentage in their, or some money to uplift them, they will feel okay. And there are so many. So you have to have a budget for them. But this time, because this short budget can uplift them, they are suffering on the ground there.
And perhaps also talk about now talking about few months to the election and some of the things that are pending. Perhaps the next government to address, on your opinion.
The next government must of all address the youth, how they can get employment, and it has to be stipulated very well so that they are having faith in the government, the next government, and it should take care of all and the youth. But the most important, if at all they caution youth to come up, I'm telling you, the Kenyan economy can move at a certain big level up, can move to a certain level that all Kenyans wants.
What is your last message to the politicians? Because as we have the CS is reading the budget, there are some of the things that Kenyans are expecting in terms of ensuring that we have a seamless election. And perhaps what, in your opinion, can be the pointers that may actually help in ensuring that we have a free and fair election?
First of all, we need security. There is no country that security is the key of any country during the election. So the only thing we have to ask, I have to ask kindly the CS security to make sure all the youths are sober and they need to go to election when they are sober. And when any youth is going to election who is hungry, they become hungry also because they need to be cautioned in the way I've said they have to reduce food. So when they go to the election, they are certified, they know they cannot be pushed, they cannot be bribed. So those are some of the problems we are having with the youth, because when they are hungry and they go to the election, find they can just blow themselves up and then they start fighting.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
There you have it. That is one gentleman just telling us the expectation today as the Ukuru Yatani reads the budget, bearing in mind also, as I mentioned earlier, that the key issues that Kenyans want be addressed is the issue of unemployment. Remember that in the last year's budget, the 2021-2022 budget, 10 billion shillings was allocated with the Kazi Mtaani. Perhaps also it is an indication that the government was keen to ensure that the issue of unemployment amongst the youth is addressed. I had a lady who wanted to give her opinion, but seems she has disappeared. But we'll be here at the Central Business District just to have a feel. What are expectations from Kenyans as Ukuru Yatani, the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, reads the budget? From me, Timothy Kipnusu, I hand back to you in studio, Betty Kiptum.
Thank you very much, Timothy Kipnusu. They are just coming to us from the CBD. He's telling us that one of his interviewees has disappeared, but we've got quite some views from the first person who talked about the issue of high unemployment in the country and just how the government needs to look into ensuring that there are jobs in the country for the unemployed young people. Now, in Mombasa County, Michael Mwandiga is standing by. What is the latest, Michael, from Mombasa?
Well, good morning to you once again, Betty Kiptum. Today is that big day we're expecting the CS for Treasury, Ukuru Yatani, just to bring us up to speed at around 3 p.m. on what entails in this mega budget, the 3.1 trillion shillings. And the common Wananchi is expecting that this budget is going to touch on various things, especially the price on basic commodities, but all said and done, the other sectors which also need to be looked into. And then we are joined by one of the experts in the field of ICT just to paint a vivid picture on what they expect this budget to entail. Karibu sana ndugu, kindly face the camera. What is your name and what will you like this budget to entail?
All right, so thank you very much. So my name is Anthony Muyoro. I'm the president of ISACA Kenya chapter, and I want to mention that for us as a technology and tech industry, we have definitely some expectations. Some of the things we are looking at is that Kenya is the future of us is also digital, and we need to really boost and invest in the digital economy. So the expectation here would be to have sufficient provisions, particularly when we talk about broadband connectivity, what we are doing in terms of building the digital infrastructure of the country, and also looking at some of the things, particularly when we talk about resources, when we talk about the capacity of the technology, when we also talk about the enabling ecosystem infrastructure that needs to go there. So the expectation here would be, you know what, the future is digital. We need to have sufficient budgets. We need to have enough resources allocated in that area.
Okay, well, talking of terms of broadband and connectivity, so far, what do you like the government to look into so that to ensure that the common Mwananchi will be able to use that internet with no hitches to ensure that as we migrate to full digitization, all is well?
All right. Yeah, and I believe the government has actually made very good strides, particularly in that regard, when you talk about broadband connectivity and giving even access, particularly when you talk about internet coverage. So basically, it's a question of accelerating the same. When you look at Kenya, Kenya, when we argue that the future is digital and that this is a digitally led economy, we need to focus also on even the marginalized communities. What is the coverage of the internet? So those are some of the things that we are now also advocating as professional bodies, as experts in the field, that yes, let's enhance what we've already started. We now have a new cable that also have been laid down, so that is ideally a good step. But of course we need more. When you look at the demographics for Kenya, we have a largely young population, right? And these are digital people. We need to get what's called the demographic dividend. So the only way we can do that is enabling access and basically just making it equitable for everyone to get connectivity. So I feel those are some of the focus areas that as a country, even from a budgetary perspective, we need to also look at.
Well, asante sana ndugu for your time. I'll also Betty joined by another ICT guru just to bring us up to speed. Sir, there now as we go into issues of health, there's digitization is also coming in as the CS is also pushing to have that the ICT knowledge to our health officials and also ensure that we can use that technology whereby we can have doctors from other areas will be teleconferencing and making the surgeons, we to make sure that we have that seamless communication. What's your put in this?
Definitely, it's a very the world is moving digital, and Kenya should never be left behind. Actually, currently the developing countries should be move more to equalize the development gap by investing in the digital space. And this medicine, it should never be left behind. Telemedicine is something that is here with us. Government should do targeted investment into the developing and building ICT infrastructures to support this, because for you to enable telemedicine, you need to think about the elements of the infrastructure itself. What investments are you putting in place? Like for today, there's a budget being done today. What's the investments that the government is putting in the digital space, which should come up as a very core element and just avoid focusing on the brick and mortar the way we've been previously investing in physical infrastructures. The digital space is going to spur a very big economic digital development in this country. So things to consider is about the infrastructure in place. Then cybersecurity also comes an issue. When you talk about matters to do with people's health, you need to develop systems that are resilient enough, systems that are secure enough. And this also always calls for resourcing in terms of manpower, in terms of the skills, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the systems that are supposed to be put in place. Yeah.
Well, asante sana ndugu. And last but not least, thank you so much, sir, for your time. And last but not least, I'll also have another expert in this IT or the digital place, just to give their input. What are you expecting today in this mega budget? Karibu sana ndugu, na utueleze tu what are your expectations in this budget, and what would you like the government to have inputs in the digital world?
Excellent, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Rafael Onyango. I'm the treasurer of ISACA Kenya board. So what I'm looking forward to is a scenario whereby the government and ISACA Kenya can continuously collaborate just to ensure that the agendas of the government and agendas of ISACA Kenya is able to be taken forward. Key to this kind of strategies is to ensure that ISACA Kenya is sustainable. Yeah, we have to be sustainable in terms of the revenues that we get on board. We have to be sustainable in terms of even the expenditure items that we take care of. And I think, and I strongly believe that the government can be a very good collaborator on this, and we should be able to have continuous and sustainable partnerships with the government. Thank you.
Well, and what would you like the government to put in place to ensure that each and every Kenyan is digitized?
Absolutely. So, because for me, I'm both an accountant, I'm a member of ISPAC, and I know very well that the government supports ISPAC under the Accountants Act 2008. And if this is going to be possible, the government can as well support ISACA Kenya by legislating an act of parliament, so that then ISACA Kenya comes to be part and parcel of the government, so that even in future, ISACA Kenya can now very sustainably, work together with the government to ensure that a greater portion of the Kenyan population are going to be digitally aware, digitally up to speed.
Okay, asante sana ndugu Nyango. As Betty Kiptum, as he has put it in perspective, they need government to put more money in this digital space to ensure that everyone is digitized. And he says that everything now is being taken to the digital platform to bring also on board the youth and to ensure that all goes well and becomes a well digitized world. That's all we have here from Mombasa County as we wait in the evening for CS Okori Yatani just to bring us up to speed and table that mega budget. As for the common mwananchi, we'll be expecting things to be well. It's all we have for now from Ashanzu in Mombasa County. Back to you in Broadcasting House, Betty Kiptum.
Thank you very much, Michael Mandiga. They are coming to us from Mombasa. Of course, the place of the digital economy coming into fore in those conversations. Rather, we now bring it back here to Nairobi. Nancy Okwara is standing by at the Treasury building where CS Ukuri Yatani will be making his walk or journey to the Parliament buildings from later in the day to address Parliament and just present that budget. Nancy Okwara, what is happening at the Treasury?
Well, a very good morning to you, Betty Kiptum, back in studio. Indeed, we are coming to you live from the National Treasury, where it is actually the first point of operation before the budget is actually presented to Parliament today. It is here that the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury and Planning, that is Ukuri Yatani, will be, leaving these premises and heading towards the Parliament buildings, where he's expected to present the budget. That is the 3.3 trillion budget to the public and of course in front of the House. What is happening right now, there's not much activity. The preparations are in top gear. Behind me we can see the preparations. Security has been beefed up along this area just to ensure that everything goes according to plan. A few moments ago, members of the public were actually allowed to pass next to the entrance, but right now as things stand, the area has been cordoned off. They can actually use the roads around here, but not anywhere near the entrance, just to ensure that once the Cabinet Secretary exits the building and comes, down the stairs, you're going to be able to get a clear view. And of course, what do we expect once the CS, leaves the building? As has been the case in previous years, we do expect that the Cabinet Secretary will be leaving the Treasury buildings at around 2 p.m. That is in the afternoon, and he will be walking out down the stairs, holding the iconic, or rather the ceremonial briefcase that is usually held containing the documents and of course the speech that he's supposed to deliver once he gets to Parliament. Once he gets here, he's going to display the briefcase so that the members of public and media can actually get a few pictures. After that, he can either choose to walk towards Parliament, which is about 850 meters from the National Treasury, or he can actually choose to use the official vehicle, as was the case when he was presenting the budget estimates for the year 2021-2022. Right now, as we can see, there is a banner actually behind me that contains the theme, which is economic, acceleration for improved livelihoods. Remember that the budget is being read at a time when the country and Kenyans are feeling the pinch of the high cost of living. Basic commodities running from food, oil and fuel have gone high. So those are some of the expectations that Kenyans do have, that the budget will put into considerations matters improving the cost of living. And remember that we do have, the Cabinet Secretary will have a hard task of balancing between the electioneering period and improving the cost of living, because we do have around 5 months to the next general election, and we expect that the election process will get a high chunk of the estimates in the budget. So that is what is happening right here at the National Treasury, the first point before the Cabinet Secretary actually heads to Parliament. We will continue keeping tabs on what is happening here, Betty, and of course we'll be updating our viewers as soon as the Cabinet Secretary leaves this. These premises, we are going to be bringing our viewers that live procession from here all the way to Parliament buildings. Betty.
Nancy, there at the Treasury. Now, Nancy, it will be quite a moment for the Treasury CS as he walks to Parliament to present the last budget of this current regime to the Parliament. Now, the citizens that you were talking to, have you talked to any a bit earlier? What are they expecting? And maybe have the roads been closed around that area right now?
Well, thank you, Betty. Actually, the roads have not been closed because right now we can see traffic is actually flowing as usually, but right now there is a little bit of a snarl up because there is a group of people that are demonstrating it. I think it's a different matter. They are holding banners on justice for Abby, and they are holding a photo of a child who they are demanding justice for. It is a story that has been going on in the media for a while right now, and that's a group of demonstrators that are passing here. It is just unrelated to the budget, but back to your question on the budget and traffic. The traffic situation, the roads have not been closed around these areas so far, but probably that is something that will be happening later on in the afternoon when the Cabinet Secretary, or rather just a few moments before the Cabinet Secretary leaves these premises walking towards Parliament. Pedestrians are also walking normally around this area, but key to note is that just a few meters to the entrance, the area has been cordoned off because when we arrived here at around 9 a.m., the area was actually open for members of public. People were walking around as usual, but right now it has been closed down just for a little bit, just next to the entrance. And also key to note is that on normal days when you come to the Treasury building, you realize that most people use this entrance right here, the National Treasury entrance, to gain entry into the building. But right now that is not being allowed. They are using a different entrance because of the ceremony that is said to be taking place later on in the afternoon. Betty.
Thank you, Nancy Okware, there from the National Treasury building, just giving us a view of what is happening there. The area has been cordoned off, but maybe the roads will be closed a little bit later before the CS makes his way to Parliament to present the 3.3 trillion shilling budget. Nancy Okware will be following him on that journey and will be filing for us a report much later in the day. Now, here in studio, we are having a conversation with some experts here to break down these numbers and just what it means for you. On my immediate right is Chachi Logutu. He is an economist at IC Asset Managers. Next to him is Christine Kahema, the Director of Alpha Tax and Business Advisory Services, as well as Michael Owor, a research fellow at Global Center for Policy and Strategy. Thank you for staying with us. Before we linked up with our reporters, we were talking about the issue of financing, the borrowing both locally and externally. And you were telling us how it's going to, say, choke the environment. Excuse me, Churchill, could you just give us an overview of how this will impact access to credit?
Thank you. The breakdown of the financing for the next financial year, it's 846 billion, and a higher weighting of that is to be financed domestically. That's around 600 billion, thereabout. 500 or 600 billion thereabout. So what usually happens, because banks, pension funds, other investors, they are the majority of investors who get into the domestic bond. And right now we find that banks are around 50%. So the domestic stock, which is around 4 trillion, 50% of that is held by banks. So that means is that they'd rather just, in this environment, fragile environment, we're getting into election period, they'd rather just lend to the government rather than lending to a risky borrower, you and me. And that's what's been playing out. Yesterday, the results for the 3-year bond that was on auction is for 3 years, so the government is borrowing at around 11.7%. So that's quite expensive, in light that if another borrower or somebody in the private sector would like to get that credit, they'll likely borrow at a higher rate than what the government is paying, 11.8%. So that is now what is called crowding out effect. As the government borrows heavily in the domestic market, it more or less pushes away all the private sector people. What the government has tried to do, which I think is a drop in the ocean is coming up with the credit guarantee scheme. The allocation in the current financial year is around 3 billion. They want to scale it up to 10 billion, but what so far has been disbursed is around 2 billion, thereabouts. So the idea is that for every loan, micro, small and medium enterprise business, if they borrow through that credit guarantee scheme, 25% of their loan is guaranteed. So the maximum limit for an SME to borrow through that credit guarantee scheme is around 1 million, and then 25% of that is now guaranteed by the government. But now the thing is, in a sector, banking sector, the total loans that have been given out to the private sector is around 3 trillion. So what is 3 billion for this credit guarantee scheme is a drop in the ocean. It's something to me, or people just looking at it, is just ticking the box that there's a credit guarantee scheme, but it's not helpful, it's not coming in meaningful to address the credit situation for some of the MSMEs. So I still, even if we'll hear that there's some allocation to the credit guarantee scheme, it's still a drop in the ocean. Banks are still not choosing to lend through that scheme, but now getting into other measures. So that's where the businesses are finding themselves. They're not able to borrow from banks, as now banks are now lending to the government, and that's a dicey situation even as we get into this heated political environment.
As Christine had earlier said, the MSME sector contributes about 60% to Kenya's GDP. Now, this sector, the economy is supposed to spur this sector so that revenue is collected, but they can't access credit. Where is the balance, or where will the balance be found, Michael?
First of all, just to join in on what Churchill has presented.
Yes.
The whole conversation is more or less an oxymoron. We have a budget that is more or less likely to be themed as the economic regeneration for improved livelihoods, while at the same time, where you expect that improved livelihood to come from is disadvantaged to a great sense because of the fiscal and monetary policy that are in play. So in a normal situation, what would happen is that we should be able to learn from our past. I think that would be important for me. What happened in the Kibaki administration, where there were policy steps which were taken which actually spurred private sector investment and growth. What happened is that government significantly reduced its borrowing from the commercial or the local market and also international market. At the same time, improved the ease of doing business so that it now becomes much more affordable for the business in the private sector to operate and essentially grow the economy. And also you see that the significant number and amount of taxes which we currently experience were not there before. For example, VAT I think was around 14 or 12% thereabout, and there were significant better ways of resolving this. In my humble opinion, my submission would be is how do we go forward from this position? Because that is a key issue. We may talk about how bad things are, but we need also to change the conversation of what is supposed to be done to better things. In my humble opinion, I think that it will be imperative, for example, to cap the budget limit as we have it, maybe at 3.3, for the next 2 or 3 years. Because it doesn't make sense to each and every year to be increasing the budget limits unsustainably. Now that we are also projecting that VAT and other incomes are also supposed to be increasing, that in essence will be reducing our fiscal deficit. So that at the end of the day, we do not have to go back into the market to get in more loans to finance this huge deficit that we're having. And then at that particular point in time, it means that the banks will only have the option of lending to the private sector at rates which are affordable and not competing with government to do the same. That would be a much better approach, and I think this is something that the next government, because this administration is more or less coming to an end, the next government should be looking at this to cap that, so that we are in a position where we do not over budget and have our incomes following or chasing our expenditures as currently it is, and then we have very huge gaps. We should cap like just a normal person would do. If I'm earning 20,000, for example, and I know that my expenditure is 25,000 in a month, I do not go and spend 25,000 each and every month. I'll try to reduce and cut down on the luxuries so that I fit within the budget. I think that is a hard decision that government should be able to make, and also communicate honestly to the Kenyan population that at this particular point in time, we have to take this situation for the betterment of the economy.
Very important there. There is a suggestion that the budget should be capped at maybe 3.3 trillion for the next few years, so that we stop chasing our budget. I mean, we are spending more than we are actually earning. So maybe that is something that the government needs to look into. Well, we want to get views of the parliamentarians, where the Treasury CS will be presenting much later in the day. The MP of Sirisia, Major John Waluke, John Jacob Kuria, our very own reporter, is on standby at the Parliament buildings to talk to him. John Jacob Kuria, take it away.
Thank you very much, Bet Kiptum, back in studio. We still continue with the wall-to-wall coverage of the budget statement to be made here today by the Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani. This is the last budget under President Uhuru Kenyatta, and of course the last budget under Ukur Yatani as CS Treasury. It is the budget for the incoming administration and the outgoing administration. And let me just talk to one of the policy makers inside this house, Major John Waluke, who is the MP for Sirisia, to get a feel about this budget. Mheshimiwa, this budget comes at a very critical time when Kenyans really are facing very big hardships.
Yeah, it is true. Out there, common mwananchi is suffering because of the inflation. Prices has gone up on everything, sugar, salt, soap, everything. Life is so hard to common mwananchi. We pray that in today's budget, I hope the minister is going to reduce prices on very important commodities that mwananchi wa kawaida uses, like unga and other things. Except like the fuel, let me be specific. The oil prices has gone up, and it is affecting everybody. Every mwananchi, they cannot even afford to buy 2 kilograms of unga or sugar or anything. So this is our country. We don't want mwananchi to live like refugees. And even government takes care of refugees. They make sure that the refugees are fitted well. And they have forgotten the Kenyans themselves, the common mwananchi. So I've not seen the budget myself, although it was made by us, and when it goes to Treasury, that is now when they make it proper to feed the common mwananchi. And that's all I can say. There's a lot that also the government has done, like this express road, like the SGR and other things, like electricity. Yeah, but the mwananchi, that mama who pays the taxpayers are forgotten. Yeah, that's all I can say.
But Mheshimiwa, when you talk about the taxation regime, because some of the proposals that will come here include taxation regimes and relief for some people, but one would ask, why would Parliament criticize the taxation regime, yet they stand in the dock as the people who passed this taxation regime?
Yeah, it depends on which side you are as a member of Parliament. We are in different coalitions, and when it comes to the floor of the House, the majority will pass either Jubilee or side or opposition side. Now, like ODM is in government, So when they come together, they will pass anything. And again, on this budget, on this fuel prices rising, there is a committee of energy. But I've not heard the members of that committee talking tough about it, because they're the ones who interrogates, who talks to the suppliers, fuel suppliers. But I have not, like myself, I've not seen them criticizing. And I always ask myself, why? Why is it like that? Because they cannot just hike the price while they know that it's going to affect Mwananchi, and they also come from constituencies where people are there, common Mwananchi is there, but they have not talked about this. Trying to interrogate, to interview why is the prices going up? It is one thing,
As you know, as the term of this parliament comes to an end, you've been in this parliament now for 2 terms. You're seeking a third term. The question would be, when you talk about this parliament from 2017 to 2022, what do you think will be the legacy of this parliament, particularly when it comes to issues of policy making and the taxation regime?
I cannot comment, because there is nothing much this parliament has tried to help common Mwananchi or talking. That's why I say that we are mixed up because of coalitions. You want to support your coalition to succeed on either a bill or a motion, but we have not spoken together as a house, as it's supposed to be, to stand firm and say that, no, look at these things, prices are going up. Some we talk, yes. When we come to now to pass the motion or the bill, that is where now the problem comes in, because one side will mobilize the majority to make sure that it fails, and that is where we are.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Major Waluke, MP for Sirisia, speaking to us this morning as regards, the budget statement that is about to be read by CS Ukur Yatani at around 2:30. Quite an interesting indictment on self. Major Waluke saying this parliament, this one, when its legacy is written, probably not much will be said about their input in terms of helping the common Mwananchi. I didn't say that. It's self-indictment by a member of parliament who sits in this chamber. And that's how things are. The cost of living is up. We will be looking, obviously, to see some of the tax proposals that will be brought by CS Ukur Yatani. What will be the relief for the common Mwananchi, particularly on the issues of unga, bread, milk, as well as, petroleum products that are consumed by the common Mwananchi. That is the big question here today, because this budget is being looked at from the lens of the cost of living. Back to you, studio.
Thank you very much, John Jacob Kioria. They're having quite an interesting conversation with Sirisia Member of Parliament, Major John Waluke, and just the self-indictment there from the passing, or rather the increasing of the debt ceiling, over the years, to quite a number of tax policies that have been passed through that parliament that have ended up hurting the common Mwananchi. Well, here in studio, we are breaking down the budget for this particular upcoming year, 2022-2023. And in studio, we are talking about, we've talked about the financing of the budget. We've talked about the debt situation in the country. And we are now conversing about just how government borrowing locally, about 570 billion shillings of that budget is supposed to be financed by local borrowing, just how that is going to occasion a further credit crunch for the small and medium enterprises. Christine, kindly give us your views on that.
That's interesting, Betty. When you look at the small and medium-sized businesses, if we are to spark growth in the economy, we really need to focus on them. There's one of the interviewees who said government needs to create employment. So that means that these SMEs need to grow so that they create opportunities for employment. Now, the biggest challenges facing the SMEs is one, access to capital, and secondly, compliance. And my question has always been, are we really creating an environment that will assist these SMEs to access the credit? As Churchill has correctly said, if government is borrowing commercially, any financial institution would rather lend to government than lend to an SME, because you're not so sure whether that SME will be in existence for the next 5 years. Do we need to come up with mechanisms to ensure that even these SMEs, even though government's strategies to borrow locally, they also try and see how best that they can do to provide access to credit? Another issue facing SMEs is with respect to payments. Most of the SMEs do work for government. Government has been delaying in paying the bills. What does that do? It puts them in a crunch. They cannot go and borrow because financial institutions are not looking into them. They haven't been paid, and therefore they cannot be able to develop their businesses forward. So I always say that there's a lot of focus that needs to be put on SMEs. And even from a compliance perspective, many SMEs struggle with taxation. Many SMEs feel that the tax regime does not work for them. What can we do through the process of public participation that is provided for under Section 118 and 119 of the Constitution, so that we can come up with systems that work for SMEs? Is it a tax regime focused on SMEs? I know it's a complicated area, taking into account that government definitely has a small workforce in order to collect those revenues. But I think it's critical that we start thinking that way. Can we come up with specific policies that are targeted to SMEs? KRA had introduced the turnover tax, which was supposed to ease compliance for SMEs, but we've seen a very little uptake from that perspective. How do we create an environment that SMEs will thrive? Because if we are to create the jobs, they're not coming from multinational enterprises. They're coming from our businesses here that will employ 1 or 2 people, but because of the volumes, you're able to employ many people. Yes.
So creating jobs through the SMEs is very important.
It is.
Let's now talk about something that is still affecting Kenyans, the fuel crisis that we are going through. The fuel shortage that has been witnessed, you know, it was a strike by the oil marketing companies, the subsidy that was finally paid, 34.4 billion shillings the other day. How do you foresee this going in the budget? Let's start with you, Churchill.
Frankly, I think this is just my view. I think the policymakers might just look the other way. They might think that this thing is temporary, and they may not, in this my view, they may not do anything about that issue to alleviate the pain. Remember that the budget process is a dynamic process that started months ago, and then this Russia-Ukraine shock just happened a few months ago. So probably it might be a bit late to bring something within the finance bill context, in light that this is the period of the finance bill is starting from July up until June next year. So probably they are just crossing their fingers and just having a wait-and-see approach, and say probably the next administration might be able to tackle this thing exhaustively. That's just my view. And speaking about this whole issue around the price stabilization and the subsidy fund, I think the framework is still not robust enough, in the sense that the Petroleum Development Levy order that was put in place in 2020, which now led to the levy increase from 40 cents to 5 shillings and 40 cents. And that's where the monies that's supposed to stabilize the prices is supposed to come from. But now that whole framework, because we have a Petroleum Development Fund, which ideally is not the same as a price stabilization fund. So there are 2 different funds. We don't have a price stabilization fund framework, yet we have a Petroleum Development Fund, which ideally is to support development of infrastructure within the oil sector. So that is a major loophole. We've been using the funds there's been collection of levies, but yet the fund that is supposed to at least ensure that price stabilization is not there. And the import of that is that initially the intent was that there should be like a threshold whereby if the global oil prices is at a certain is at a certain level, be it at $50 per barrel, be it at $60 per barrel, and that's the threshold, and then prices go up. Like say if the threshold is $50 per barrel, global oil prices goes to $70 per barrel. Because Kenya is a net importer nation, that $20 difference is now supported from this price stabilization fund. That ideally is the intent of that. But what we are saying is a subsidy, in the sense that now the oil marketers, after buying the oil at the market price, the current market price. That's where the subsidy is coming from. Now the margin to the oil marketers. So it's a bit warped. There needs to be a robust framework to ensure that there's a proper price stabilization fund in the event that issues such as what has happened last 2 months, Russia-Ukraine war, led to upward spiral in the oil prices. That's where the fund will come in handy. But right now, I think it's quite a messy affair. Unless it's tackled from having a proper price stabilization fund, we'll still be in this issue of just kidding ourselves that we have a subsidy, yet it's not quite sustainable in my view.
Not quite sustainable. Well, Kenyans pay about 9 taxes when it comes to fuel alone. So from the when the landing cost is about, say, $70 shillings, Kenyans will pay around 130, you know. So, Michael, do you agree with what he's suggesting, or do you have other thoughts?
I think that my response would be tied to what Christine and Churchill have responded to. One is the prudent management of public resources in terms of general management of the economy. If I'm to go back, in situations where you have the deficit that we're currently having, it would make more sense to read. The only way you're working out of it is either by increasing your incomes or by reducing your expenditures. What can government do at this particular point in time, especially the next government, to be able to arrest this situation so that you don't have your recurrent expenditures and overheads going overboard? Is first of all to reduce this sentimental, in my opinion, the sentimental connections to state-owned organizations, most of which are loss-making. They are portfolios that are held by government, not because of any strategic value, but because they are part of our legal framework. But they don't add any value. Why don't you privatize them, use that money to fill in your deficit or your gaps, and then at the same time, allow the private sector to run them so that they can create those opportunities of job opportunities that you need to create. I think that would be more prudent. Organizations such as, for example, sadly, Kenya Airways, the amount of money that they are asking at any particular point in time in terms of bailout is, for the lack of a better word, unsustainable. 20 billion, 50 billion, those are not, and it's a recurrent thing. Why don't you privatize it, get it out of government's hands, and let the private sector deal with it? In terms of oil, and this is my humble opinion, is that the Petroleum Development Levy, whether you want to call it a stabilization fund or a subsidy fund, to me it's a double-edged sword. First of all, government are not particularly known to run subsidy programs sustainably for a very long time. I think that is not their strong point. It will be much more efficient, in my opinion, to let these things be subjected to the market forces, and then let the institutions which are supposed to regulate competition, for example, the Competition Authority, check for abuse or monopolistic tendencies in the market. Have, for example, EPRA giving advisories of what the limits should be with regards to the petroleum prices, so that we do not have each and every time, like the CS for Treasury was saying, that the way we are going, each and every month will be required to, the Treasury will be required to pay into the fund 10 or 15 billion every month. If this thing goes for the next, let's say, remaining 10 or 8 months, you're talking about 120 billion. In any form of imagination, that is not sustainable. And we also need to put this in perspective, that we are not the only ones who are having the high price changes. Go to Tanzania, look at the prices that they're having, but they're still operating. Why can't we in Kenya have a similar approach to this whole situation? Because pretending that government is going to bail us out while they are struggling with debts and other obligations which they cannot let go is just expecting too much.
Expecting too much.
Yes.
Well, Christine, you've been nodding as Michael has been speaking. Do you share those sentiments?
I think the fuel issue will be one that the CS cannot hide away from. And the reason I say this is because inflation is at 6.3%. And the drivers of inflation is fuel and food. That is definitely what the issue is. And therefore, the CS has to come up with a way of addressing this issue. You will remember that last year, they introduced a petroleum bill that was supposed to reduce VAT to 4%, reduce LPG, VAT on LPG from 16% to 8%. And this is because of the issues that the Mwananchi was facing at the time. That bill went through the first reading and then it went quiet. Now, it has actually caught up with government at the moment. Yes, the subsidy is there. It's supposed to bail us out. But even this subsidy is actually is out of money that the Mwananchi has actually paid. I think what the CS needs to do is review the taxes that are connected to fuel. Okay, because we can't hide. We can't just say that we'll be using the subsidy to sort us out. Indirect taxes are a consumer tax, meaning that the consumer suffers the wrath of the tax. There is excise tax on the fuel. There is custom duty on the fuel. There is VAT on the fuel. Can the government consider to review this, reduce the VAT maybe on the fuel from 8% to 4%? Will that be something to consider, or even slightly reduce it to 6%, so that we are not always running to see how to save the common Mwananchi through the fund, but also through a reduction of the tax? It's the consumer who bears the wrath of the indirect taxes. We are keenly waiting to see how he treats the fuel issue, because that's one thing that is driving inflation. He cannot hide away from it, but anything he does from it, he knows will create a hole from a revenue collection perspective. And if he doesn't do anything about it, remember, we've got 2 months, so the bill will be tabled today. Hopefully the finance bill will be out. The Parliament needs to dissolve by the 10th of June. So in between, most stakeholders will definitely be given an opportunity for public participation. And if nothing is done about the fuel, we expect to see a lot of public submissions geared towards fuel. And because the members of Parliament are going back to the common Mwananchi, they need to save face. They need to say that we passed this, we did this to reduce the rate. So even if we don't see a reduction in the finance bill or in the budget statement, we expect to see some of it coming through the process of public participation. And when the act actually comes into force, we should be able to see some changes with respect to taxation of fuel.
Wow. We have about 6 minutes to go, so I will ask you a question and then you will give me your final submissions kindly. That as we walk into the budget reading, is it a pipe dream to expect any taxes? I'll start with you, Churchill.
Well, it's a pipe dream because we still expect that there'll be some newer proposals. That's something as given, like there'll be some, what to say, that the only things that are constant in life is death and taxes. So newer taxes will be part and parcel of this finance bill. So, but obviously, as what Christine has said, there'll be this pushback because there are usually those annoying tax proposals each and every financial year that keeps creeping up. And I believe that even this time round, there'll be those kind of pushbacks, even with the finance bill that will be tabled after the budget presentation. Yeah.
Christine?
We may not see a reduction in taxes, and maybe some tax heads might not be touched, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to see ways in which the CS can come up to raise taxes. Like a couple of years ago, they introduced the digital service tax, and that has actually generated some more income. And this is because we had a lot of businesses going through the digital space that was not being subjected to taxation. So I think with the Revenue Authority and the National Treasury, they'll have to come up with ways, if they're not to touch the current taxes, to expand the tax base, bring more taxpayers into the ambit of taxation in order to manage the 3.3 trillion budget. You can imagine junior school is just about to begin, So a lot of money has to go into the educational sector. With the upcoming elections, the issue of security, the issue of ICT, funding all those things definitely requires the money, and we need the money now. Unlike in other years, maybe the money was not really critical at this point in time. As a result of that, I do not see reduction in taxes. Some taxes may be retained, but I hope to see ways in which government will come up in expanding the tax base so that all taxpayers are paying their fair share of taxes.
A fair share of taxes. Thank you, Christine. Michael, finally?
Your question represents the whole situation. At this particular point in time, what usually happens is that Kenyans usually know what they are going to get taxed on. Mm-hmm. The finance bill is usually at this particular point in time before the reading of the budget already out in public domains, because it shows or communicates how government is going to raise revenue. Mm-hmm. Now we are going to a situation where the budget is being read, where everybody, including parliamentarians, who this budget making process is squarely their domain. Mm-hmm. This is their responsibility. Mm-hmm. And if anybody has dropped the ball, if I'm apportioning blame, I'm apportioning it squarely on Parliament, mm-hmm. because they have failed on their roles. So I would be pleasantly surprised if taxes were reduced, but from what I'm seeing, I do not think that will hold. There will be taxes, aggressive collection of taxes by KRA, who by the way are doing a splendid job under the circumstances, notwithstanding, mm-hmm. And also roping in more commodities or goods to be taxed. That is my estimation.
Wow, so you expect more taxes. Well, that is a hard or a bitter pill for Kenyans to swallow, but yes, that is the situation on the ground. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us. I have been speaking with Churchill Ogutu on my immediate right. He's an economist at IC Asset Managers. Christine Kahema, right next to him, is the director at Alpha Tax and Business Advisory Services, and Michael Owor, a research fellow at the Global Center for Policy and Strategy. And we just have been delving into the budget, the numbers that we are expecting Treasury CS Ukur Yatani to read. And when as we continue with this conversation, I just want us to get into the areas that Uhuru's government has been has been focused on, matters infrastructure development. Well, over the years, infrastructure budgeting has been quite massive. There have been massive infrastructure projects going on, and just what impact have these had on the economy? I think I'll start with you, Michael.
I think what we can attribute the outgoing administration for doing quite well is with regards to the infrastructure. The debate over the costing and otherwise, I think those ones can be had in a different forum. Yeah. But there's a general appreciation that there have been massive improvements. We have the roads being constructed, and these are things which will have will be that with us for a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. What I'm expecting is that this being a transitional government, I foresee that the last of this government budget will be more or less with regards to the Big Four agenda and finalizing the legacy projects. Mm-hmm. Whether the administration will get the time to finalize that is another matter altogether, mm-hmm. because we have an incoming administration that has its own priorities and most likely may have its own investment and economic ethos. And as I said previously, that will get a clearer picture of what the budget would look like in terms of implementation, where the supplementary budget is being read. Because there are conditions that allow for that. For example, if there is significant changes in microeconomic status, if there's under-budgeting or over-budgeting across ministry lines. So I foresee that for the next cycle, maybe from August, there'll be a shifting of those funds into priority areas for the new administration rather than for the Kenyatta administration, and that will leave a lot of white elephants, if not clearly harmonized. Yes.
Do you share those sentiments, Christine?
Yes, I do, and I'm thinking that from an infrastructure perspective, remember this is a developmental saving to the extent that there should be a return on investment on this infrastructure, because the infrastructure is supposed to spur growth, and we are seeing a lot of public-private partnerships that have resulted in the growth of this sector, and also government going into it. I'm hoping that we can also get to a point where we evaluate the return on investment of that infrastructure and how it has contributed into the growth of the GDP. Once we see that, it will definitely help us focus on putting money where we know we are going to get the greatest return as government. And maybe with that, we'll be able to generate our own revenues, reduce debt, and also cushion the common mwananchi by not just using tax as a way of generating revenues, but focusing on the infrastructure project as ways to raise government revenue. Yes.
As ways to raise government revenue. Churchill, the issue of infrastructure, I mean, the government has been pumping in a lot of money. Have we seen return on investment?
Yeah. On one hand, there's what you said, there's that pumping of money towards infrastructure. We've seen both roads being built, as a railway and all other infrastructural projects, and yet return on investment, we are not even seeing that commensurate. And from the Treasury side point of view, they're looking at all the projects that needs to be, the capital projects needs to have a return of investment of at least 10%. But if you just go one by one, all the projects that have been done, can we confidently say that they are giving us a return of 10%? Is on the contrary. And just to look at the bigger picture, we have this Vision 2030 blueprint, whereby we are in the sunset year of the third medium-term plan, and that's where the Big Four was carved out of. And we are getting into a transition whereby the next administration will not be dealing with Big Four. There'll be other issues that will be dealt with. So probably the issues around Big Four is as good as dead. Yes, the infrastructure was supposed to be enablers of the Big Four, but right now, if we start looking at the Big Four sectors, we might just say probably it's as good as we didn't do much. So overall, the kind of growth model that has been within this administration has been focused on the infrastructure, and that's on investments. And yet, what even we heard from the interviewer who was talking about unemployment, it now speaks about consumption side rather than investments. Yes, they are good, the investments. It now gives us like, 6% growth, 5% growth, but not everyone is feeling that growth number. But if it's more or less reoriented in one way, or the policymakers come up with a mix whereby there's that matching that this is consumption driven, whereby it leads to people getting meaningful jobs, that's where people might feel the growth in the economy. So probably that will be the task for the next administration, whoever will be, just to at least ensure that more employment opportunities are created by the growth model that will be employed. But having said that, and the other thing that I also fault the agencies is the dearth in data, in the sense that what's the unemployment rate? Today, 7th of April, or the latest figures, what was the unemployment rate? No one knows, because this data, once Kenya National Bureau of Statistics started publishing it on a quarterly basis, and then it stopped. But we need to be like up to date. Like today, this is the unemployment rate. These are the people who are not employed, and if we can be able to find ways of at least ensuring there is that data set and trying to plug, is it a skills match? What is the issue that these people are not getting jobs, and then trying to find solutions around that. I think that will be a way of ensuring that there's this growth. Yes, there's investments on the other side, but more inclined towards consumption. Yeah.
It's very important to have data that is updated, in real time, so that you can make decisions based on the situation, the actual situation. Now, as we look at this budget, we've said that it's what the next regime is going to use. Michael suggested that the budget is capped at a certain point to allow us to stop chasing after it. Is there more that the next government can do, and just how messed up is the situation for them? even as we head into the polls in August. Christine?
I think as a country, we need to start focusing on the expenditure section. I mean, if we are to cap it, it means that we really need to focus on all the line items from an expenditure perspective. I know with the constitution, we now have many governors, county members, members of parliament. We are here. Yeah, but how do we ensure that we are reviewing each and every line and leaking any instance that is resulting into revenue leakage? You know, the issue of corruption, how can we deal with it such that it becomes a reality? Because I always say Kenyans are very energetic, they can thrive. Yeah, because I mean, going through what we've gone through and we can still survive, it means that we are a very strong generation. So can we look at all those levels of revenue leakage and seal them through accountability by government? Can we get to a position whereby we are getting quarterly updates? This is what you gave us. This is how we have used it. Everyone is driven from an accountability perspective, from the top to the bottom. If we do that, we can be able to seal. If we are not able to manage that, I can tell you it will be very difficult to have a seal on the expenditure. Yeah.
Accountability, and as Michael said, budget caps. Michael, do you think there's more that can be done?
Of course, there's more that can be done. And essentially, from where I'm sitting, I'm looking at what would be the priorities for the next government. One of it, as Christine has correctly mentioned, is to cut the fat, manage the expenditure. Number two, I think it will be also imperative for the next government to drop, and whoever wants to become the next president, they need to drop populist programs which do not yield substantial returns in investment. There are communications around the 6,000 for each houses, and then we have a 50 billion there to give the mamambogas, and then we had we currently even have the kazi mtaani. I would group them in the same boat, because they do not yield so much in the long run, because when the supply is cut, then they also more or less die. They do not have a life of their own, regardless of the arguments which are being made. It will be much more prudent, I think, to have the operating economic environment conducive for the investor, the middle and small scale enterprises. Those are the people who are going to push this growth that we are talking about. Devoid of that, it will be pretty difficult. So it's, first of all, cut the expenditure, have that budget cap so that let your incomes catch up with the expenditures, reduce, and that enables you to reduce the amount that you're borrowing from the local market, which I also think that it will harm the economy more, if that is the thought, because of what Churchill says is the crowding out effect. A lot of people will not be able to get the finances. Even if you're giving them guarantees, it will not be commensurate to the amount of money that you need to put in the economy to spur demand. I think that is more important at this particular point in time, rather than to increase expenditures. Yes.
Very important. Well, thank you very much for your thoughts. I will give each of you 20 seconds to give me your final thoughts. I'll start with you, Michael.
Interesting budget today. I'm really looking forward to it, and I just hope that there is a reason for the delay, and it's a good reason, especially for the Kenyan people. I really hope and pray that there's something in for them that is more sustainable to the cost of living and the plight that we're facing now. Yes.
It is the hope of every Kenyan. Christine?
Yes. Legacy budget, I'm also looking for proposals that will work for the common mwananchi, and I look at proposals that will help to build the economy, drive revenues, because when that happens, government also benefits from a tax perspective. Yes.
Very important. Churchill?
Yeah, let me build on something that Mike had said earlier on in terms of MPs dropping their ball. And I'm quite worried because of the sequencing of this budget. The budget statement is being tabled. We haven't seen the finance bill. We haven't seen some other necessary documents. And yet we are within the primary party primaries. A number of MPs might be kicked out. So, and what you've seen in the last 2-3 weeks, lack of quorum or quorum hitches in Parliament. So I'm afraid that even as we get geared towards mid of June, some of these bills may not be passed in time, or there could be a bit of some fast tracking. There'll be a bit of some acceleration of some of the processes, whereby we are not critiquing the documents. So that's my main worry, that could be a lack of quorum, delay in the passing of the necessary legislation, such that by the time they proceed on the recess before the elections, at least things have been put in place. So that's my main worry. But that is just my pessimistic view. I hope that things will pan out well.
We all hope that things will pan out well. Thank you very much for your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, I have been speaking in studio with Churchill Ogutu, an economist at IC Asset Managers, as well as Christine Kahema, Director at Alpha Tax and Business Advisory Services, as well as Michael Owar, a research fellow at Global Center for Policy and Strategy. And we have been breaking down the numbers for the full year 2022-2023 budget that is supposed to be read by Treasury CS Ukur Yatani at around 2:30 p.m. in Parliament today. And now we want to switch our broadcasting to the Swahili language, and my colleague Timothy Kipnusu is standing by in the CBD to give us the latest. For me, I am done here. My name is Betty Kiptum. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Bye-bye.
Asante sana mwenzangu Betty Kiptum kwenye studio zetu hapa jijini Nairobi, kama ulivyodokeza na kujia moja kwa moja kutoka viungani mwa jiji la Nairobi kuweza kufahamu ni yepi yanayojiri hasa siku hii ya kihistoria, ambapo waziri wa fedha Ukur Yatani anatarajiwa kusoma bajeti au makadirio ya bajeti ya mwaka 2022-2023, bajeti ya kima cha shilingi trilioni 3.3. Baadhi tu ya wananchi ambao tayari nimesemezana nao wanazungumzia kuhusiana na kupanda kwa gharama ya maisha, bila shaka ambayo imetokana na chamko la corona, na vile vile tu kuzungumzia kuhusiana na matarajio kuhusu zoezi la uchaguzi, kizingatia kwamba zimesalia siku kama miezi minne ili Wakenya waweze kubaini mbivu na mbichi kwenye kinyang'anyiro cha Agosti 9, na kuweza kufahamu maoni au semi za wananchi kuhusiana na matarajio yao kuhusu bajeti, na jiunga na mmoja wao. Asante sana kujiunga nasi huko mbashara kwenye KBC Channel 1. Matarajio yako ni yapi waziri Ukur Yatani atakaposoma bajeti mwendo wa saa 2 au saa 8:30 hivi?
Kwa majina naitwa Kennedy. Matarajio yangu kwa haya makadirio ya bajeti ya mwaka huu 2022, matarajio yangu ni mengi, ijapo sina uhakika kwamba yanaweza timishwa, kwa sababu hii ni bajeti ambayo imekuja kwa wakati mbaya. Hivi sasa tuko na vita ulimwenguni kati ya mataifa mawili ya Ukraine na Russia, ambao yameleta mtetemeko wa bei ya bidhaa za muhimu sana duniani. Na upande mwingine taifa letu la Kenya linakabiliana na uchaguzi wa mwezi wa 8 tarehe 9 mwaka huu, ambapo inatajika sasa waziri wetu Ukur Yatani awe na kiwango kikubwa cha fedha, ndio aweza kuhimili makali wa msimuko wa bei, sana sana na bidhaa muhimu, tuseme mafuta ya kupikia, mafuta ya uchukuzi, bidhaa za jikoni, sana sana kwa wale ambao ni hai katika jamii yetu. Nafikiri Ukur Yatani lazima afanye ile inaitwa balancing act kwa umakinifu sana, lakini uchumi wa sasa wa taifa letu sidhani kama utahimili. Nafikiri matarajio ya wengi wa wananchi wa Kenya ni kwamba haya ni makadirio ambayo yatakuwa mazuri kwa karatasi.
Lakini kuzungumzia kuhusiana na kiwango kikubwa zaidi ya fedha ambayo bajeti hii imetengwa, masuala yapi kinaganaga ambayo unataka pengine Waziri Ukur Yatani aweze kuangazia kwenye bajeti hiyo? Kando na kupanda kwa gharama ya maisha, umezungumzia kuhusiana na mfumuko wa bei ya bidhaa muhimu kama vile mafuta. Kando na hayo, pengine masuala yapi mengine?
Swali zuri sana hilo Bwana Timothy. Mimi kama mwana Kenya halisi anayetakia taifa letu mazuri, kipaumbele ningetaka ipatie idara ya elimu. Taifa letu limeanza kukaribisha mtaala mpya ambao unaitwa CPC, ambao ni mtaala ambao unahitaji tembecheo nyingi sana sana walimu ambao wamehitimu vilivyo. Haya, na wengine wengi wapelekwe katika mafunzo ambayo inahitaji pesa za dharura. Kiwango kingine cha pesa, kiwango kikubwa ningetarajia kielekezo upande wa hizi taasisi za uchunguzi kama EACC, NIS, KRA na zinginezo. Ndio hao wakurugenzi wa hizo idara mbalimbali wawe na fedha za kuajiri wataalamu ambao wamehitimu katika hizo nyanja. Tuseme kama hii ya EACC, wale ambao wamehusishwa na urachi rushwa ama vitendo vyovyote vile ambao ni vya ufisadi, kesi zao siendelezwe, na kesi hasiendelezwe kama hakuna ufadhili wa kutosha wa kifedha. Wataalamu waachiriwe, machachi wengi waachiriwe, ndio hao wakurugenzi wahakikisha kwamba kesi zote ambazo wenye wanataka kuwania katika vyeo mbalimbali kwa uchaguzi vimemalizwa kwa wakati ambao ufaao, ndio tusiwe na viongozi ambao ni wataberi, ambao hawahitimu vizuri, ambao hawana nyendo nzuri, wasiwe katika debe. Kiwango kingine kipelekwe kwa upande wa sekta ya mafuta. Kuna ile inaitwa rusuku. Ndio wapewe rusuku, ndio wasiwe na hii hulka ya kuongeza hizi bidhaa za mafuta kiolela. Wapewe rusuku kama mwesu naelewa rusuku ya kitita cha bilioni 34 ambazo rais wetu mpendwa alitia sahihi, na sahihi tumeanza kuona mafuta imeanza kuonekana katika mitaa mbalimbali. Rusuku hiyo iwe na makadirio yake, ndio watu wasiche wakapatiwa nafasi tena ya kupandiza. Haya, ningependa tena pia kiwango kingine kiende katika project za president. Hizi projects ambazo rais alikuwa ameanza, na tunaelewa kwamba ana muda mfupi sana kuwa ofisini, hizo pesa zitengwe vizuri, siwe na matumizi mazuri. Hizo projects sikamilishwe kwa wakati ambao ufaao.
Asante.
Ndio kusindisa rais nyumbani tukimruhusia matusi ambayo yafanya.
Asante, maoni mazuri zaidi. Kwa sababu ya usawa wa kijinsia, pengine nipate mwanadada. Asante sana kwa kuweza kuzungumza nasi kwenye KBC. Karibia hapo mwanadada, pengine tueleze wewe vile una matarajio yapi? Pengine ungevua kofia hiyo ili uweze kuonekana vizuri. Matarajio yapi ni yapi Waziri Ukur Yatani atakaposoma bajeti hii leo?
Asante. Kwa majina naitwa Nancy Machasio, na mimi kama mama natarajia watapunguza bei ya bidhaa, sana sana hizi vitu ambazo tunazihitaji sana kwa jikoni na basic needs, basic food ile tunahitaji on daily basis kama maziwa, sukari, unga na mafuta ya kupika.
Yeah. Asante sana. Mwisho pengine asante kwa kuzungumza nasi. Karibia hapa, wewe unaitwa nani? Matarajio yako pengine sekunde 30.
Naitwa Dibora Dhuranira, na mimi chenye naweza taka waongelele ni issues za wanafunzi. Comrades wanasumbuka sana juu ya school fees. Like this year wengi sana wamecall off juu ya kukosa school fees. Alafu wengine wanaenda kutafuta vibarua na ambiwa sijui walete 5 years of experience. Sijui wakienda kutafuta attachment unaambiwa sijui ukuwe na connections huko juu. Sasa issues zimekuwa ngumu sana kwa comrades na watu shughulikie. Tunapitia mambo mingi sana.
Asante. Natumai kilio chako kitaweza kusikika kwa Waziri Ukur Yatani. Bila shaka ni maoni tumbi kutoka kwa wakazi hapa kwenye jiji la Nairobi kuhusiana na matarajio yao tu kuhusu bajeti au makadirio ya bajeti mwaka 2022 2023. Kumbuka kwamba hii ni bajeti ya mwisho katika chini ya uongozi wake Rais Uhuru Kenyatta, na vile ni bajeti ya mwisho kwake Waziri Ukur Yatani. Baadhi tu ya maswala wakizungumzia kuhusiana na ile ajenda 4 kuu ya serikali kwamba fedha ziweze kutengwa ili baadhi ya hizo ajenda hizo iweze kutamatika, na vile vile swala hili la kupambana na jinamizi la ufisadi ambalo limedumaza na kulemaza uchumi wa taifa hili, kwamba mgao wa fedha iende katika vita dhidi ya ufisadi, ili kwamba baadhi tu ya wale ambao wanatuhumiwa kuhusika na ulaji rushwa au sakata za ufisadi waweze kukabiliwa ipasavyo na hata kutoruhusiwa kuwania viti mbalimbali kwenye kinyang'anyiro cha Agosti 9. Nitakuwa hapa kuweza kupata maelezo zaidi na vile vile usemi zaidi kutoka kwa wananchi, lakini kwa sasa moja kwa moja mwenzangu Betty Kiptum na fululiza hadi kwenye gatuzi la Kisumu ambapo mwenzangu Wycliffe Okech yuko pale vile vile na baadhi ya Wakenya waweze kupeana maoni yao. Kazi kwako Wycliffe Okech.
Na asante sana mwenzangu Kipnusu ukiwa Nairobi. Nasi tumekita kambi katika jiji hili la Kisumu tukiangazia swala hili zima la bajeti ya leo ambao tunatarajia waziri wa fedha Ukur Yatani kusoma hapo baadaye. Na siku ya leo tumekuwa tukizungumza na baadhi ya wakazi wa eneo hili tukipata maoni yao ama matarajio yao kutokana na bajeti ambayo tunatarajia isome na Balozi Ukur Yatani hapo baadaye. Lakini kwa sasa ningependa kujumika naye mmoja wa wakazi wa eneo hili, labda atueleze yeye kama mkazi wa eneo hili la Kisumu matarajio yake ni gani hapo tunaposubiri Balozi Ukur Yatani kusomea. Lakini kwa kurahisisha mawasiliano utaniruhusu tuzungumze kwa lugha ya Kimombo ndio tuanze kuwasiliana na mkazi huyo. Brother, probably if you can speak to us and you'll explain to us your name and what is your expectation ahead of the unveiling of this year's budget. I'll hold it for you.
It's okay. I'm Justus Omolo. Well, what I expect from the budget of today from the CS, in Kisumu we have 3 economic activities. That is fishing, agriculture and business. And the entire city is stricken by lack of fuel within this region. And this is anchored to every sector. We've been affected so much, and we don't expect the budget to hike anything, particularly the consumable goods at this time. Yes.
And if you look at this region, like you've rightly put it, it's the farming, the fishing that are the dominant economic activities here. And we've seen the farmers actually complaining about the price of the farm inputs, talk about the fertilizers and all that. What exactly maybe you would expect the budget, the finance ministry to incorporate in the budget probably to mitigate the high prices of farm inputs?
I think the farm inputs, they need to reduce the prices of fertilizers so that we can feel at ease and promote the agricultural sector. And we believe we don't expect any hiking this time in terms of agricultural input items. Yes.
Earlier on we were speaking to other fellows from this part of the country, and they were explaining to us that maybe the medical sector, or the healthcare sector also needs an injection of some more funds, probably to increase some accessibility to healthcare. As a resident of Kisumu, what specific ministries or other departments would you want the government to focus more as it unveils the budget for this year?
Well, the department actually that I would focus on, the ministry to focus on, is on health. Because health, we don't have drugs in the hospitals. The patients are told to go and purchase from pharmacies, and we are hit hard. We expect something to be done by the ministry, so that the drug, we can get them available in our institutions. Yes.
And again, we are talking about the high cost of living that every Kenyan is actually complaining about now. Which specific, probably the specific steps that the government must take, actually with regard to the budget, which specific steps that it must take to address the high cost of living?
The high cost of living right now is caused by lack of fuel and consumable goods in the supermarkets. People are working from hand to mouth, no savings, because the prices of everything has gone up. So the government should actually reduce fuel and make the fuel to be available for business people.
Yes. Thank you so much. Gladys, huyo tu ni mmoja wa kazi wa eneo hili akizungumza nasi kuhusiana na masuala hili zima la bajeti ambayo tunatarajia Balozi Ukur Yatani kusoma hapo baadaye. Lakini jinsi umesikia akizungumza akisema kwamba uhaba wa mafuta labda ndio umepelekea uchumi kukua ngumu, labda Wakenya wamekuwa wakilalamikia hali ngumu ya maisha, na jinsi umeweza kusikia wewe mwenzangu akisema hapo ni kwamba uhaba wa mafuta ambao unashuhudiwa nchi mzima labda imepelekea hali ya maisha kuwa ngumu hivyo. Na hivyo jinsi umeweza kusikia kutoka kwake, anatarajia kwamba bajeti inaposomwa leo pengine Wizara ya Fedha itakuwa inatia manani kwa swala hilo la uhaba wa mafuta ili kuhakikisha kwamba bei ya bidhaa za kawaida inashuka na Wakenya kuweza kuishi maisha ya kawaida. Hili ni jambo tutakuwa tukiendelea kufuatilia kwa karibu na kuwapasha ama kuarifu watazamaji wetu jinsi hata baadaye hapa baada ya bajeti hiyo kusoma. Lakini kwa sasa ni hapo studioni Gladys.
Asante sana mwenzangu Wycliffe Okech. Mtazamaji, hao ni wanahabari wenzangu Timothy Kipnusu katika jiji la Nairobi na Wycliffe Okech akituripotia moja kwa moja kutoka kaunti ya Kisumu, akitueleza hisia na taswira ya wakazi wa jiji hilo kuhusiana na bajeti ya mwaka 2022 mwaka 2023. Kulingana na klabu zetu za sasa studioni, zimepita tu dakika za kuhesabu baada ya saa 6 adhuhuri. Na mtazamaji, baada ya kujumuika na mwenzangu Betty Kiptum kwenye lugha ya Kimombo, sasa tuangazie uchambuzi wa bajeti kwa lugha ya Kiswahili. Mimi nafahamika kama Gladys Mungai na Elensa Odingo atakuwa ananisaidia kukupa mahojiano haya kwa lugha ya ishara. Studioni ninao wageni wawili wanafahamika kama Alex Kidake, ni mtaalamu wa masuala ya kifedha, na Robert Maina ambaye pia ni mtaalamu wa masuala ya ushuru, masuala ambayo ni tajika kabisa kuhusiana na bajeti ya mwaka huu. Na moja kwa moja wageni wangu tukiangazia yaliyoko kwenye bajeti ya mwaka 2023 mwaka 2022, ni bajeti ya mwisho kabisa ya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta na miaka 10 katika uongozi wa Jubilee. Pengine mtazamo wako kuhusiana na bajeti hii ya trilioni 3.3. Alex, pengine nikianza na wewe.
Asante sana. Kwa majina naitwa Alex Kidake Malova ambaye anahusika na mambo ya fedha. Ile kitu ambayo naweza sema ni kuwa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta, ile kitu ambayo anataka kufanya ni kuwa anataka kuacha legacy. Na ile tuko kwa wakati mgumu, na ile kitu ambayo inafanyika sasa hii ni ku make sure that economy ya Kenya, tunataka ku make sure that imepick. Ndiposa unaona ameweka fedha kama hizo, na niko na imani kubwa kuwa pesa mingi zitaenda kwa shughuli ambayo itawezesha serikali ama wananchi kuweza kugenerate ama kutengeneza pesa, ndiposa waweze kukua na pesa katika mifuko zao. Sasa ndiposa ameweza kuileta wakati kama huu, na niko na imani kuwa pesa mingi itaenda kwa maendeleo, itaenda kwa ukulima, kwa sababu mambo imekuwa ngumu kulingana na ile ambayo tumepitia, mambo ya COVID. Maisha imekuwa ngumu kwa wananchi. Asante.
Robert, kwa kifupi tu pengine mtazamo wako kuhusiana na bajeti ya mwaka ambao unapaniwa kuanzia mwezi Julai ikilinganishwa pengine na bajeti iliyopita.
Asante sana. Tunatazamia kuwa bajeti itaangazia mambo kadhaa mengine ni kuwa pia fedha, tunahitaji fedha kuweza kuendeleza nchi. So kuweza kucollect zile kodi lazima iweze kuelezea vile ambavyo wanaangazia wataweza kupata zile fedha za kugharamia hiyo bajeti ya trilioni 3.3.
Naam. Yeah. Alex, Robert anadhamiria kwamba ni sharti bajeti ijikite kwenye masuala ya wananchi, hasa ikilinganishwa kwamba swala la gharama ya maisha limepanda. Kwa mtazamo wako katika bajeti hii ya trilioni 3.3, pengine imeratibiwa kwa kumfaa mwananchi wa kawaida?
Ile kitu ambayo naona hapa kuwa ni kuwa jinsi nilivyosema, Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta anataka make sure that ameacha legacy yake, na ile kitu ambayo naona sana ni kuwa unajua Wakenya wamepitia maisha ngumu na Wakenya wako tayari kufanya kazi.
Naam.
Na njia pekee yake ambayo hii budget inaweza saidia mwananchi wa kawaida ni kuhakikisha watu wanafanya kazi. Kwa sababu Wakenya wanataka kufanya kazi, na wasipofanya kazi kukikuwa na wizi na nini, hiyo ndio mambo ambayo inaharibu nchi yetu. So ile kitu lafaa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta wafanye katika hii budget, ile mambo ambayo tunatarajia sana. Tunataka kuona kama maisha ya vijana, wameangazia vijana waweza kupata kazi, kwa sababu ukiangalia Kenya, zile vitu ambazo tunapata kutoka nje ni mingi kuliko zile ambazo sisi tunapeleka nje. So ile kitu ambayo naweza sema ni kuwa lafaa hii budget iangazie, tukue na pesa za kuset some local factories, tukue na hizo factories za hapa ndiposa watu wetu waweze kupata kazi, tukue na trainings kwa mambo ya agriculture, at least watu wanaweza panda zile bidhaa ambazo zitawasaidia, kukue na pesa ambazo zitawekwa kando kwa wamama, kwa vijana ambao wanaweza chukua mkopo bila kulipa interest yoyote. Na jambo lingine ambayo inaweza saidia hii nchi yetu sana ni sana mambo ya vijana, kwa sababu unajua the percentage ya vijana iko juu sana. Unajua vijana ndio msingi wa kila kitu. So ile kitu ambayo tunatarajia kuona katika hii budget ni kuwa wataangazia mambo mingi sana, kwa sababu vijana wetu wamekuwa idle. Hata ukiangalia mambo ya mpira hakuna, mambo ya sport hakuna kitu yote ambayo inaendelea. Na kuna election na tumetoka kwa COVID. Watu wamepoteza kazi, watu wengi wako nyumbani wamekaa na kazi, wengine mshahara imepunguzwa mpaka saa hii jarudishwa juu. So vitu kama hizo, mambo ya tax, lazima ukiangalia mambo ya ushuru, kuna bidhaa kadhaa kama unga nini, hizo lafaa zitolewe, tupewe tax exemption. Alafu ile kitu ya muhimu sana ambao naweza sema serikali lafifanya, serikali lafaa iwache kukopa pesa kwa benki za hapa nchini.
Naam, tutazungumzia masala ya mikopo. Ikilinganisha kwamba deni la taifa linaonekana linazidi kupanda. Lakini Alex, umezungumzia swala la bidhaa, kuhakikisha kwamba bidhaa ambazo zinaagizwa kutoka mataifa ya kigeni kuja nchini hazizidi zile ambazo pengine Kenya inatoa na kupeleka katika mataifa ya kigeni. Kunao mpango katika bajeti kwamba bidhaa ambazo zinaletwa kutoka mataifa ya kigeni na kuuzwa Kenya ziongezewe ushuru. Pengine kwa mtazamo wako kama mtaalamu wa masuala ya kifedha, hii ni njia mojawapo ya kuhakikisha kwamba tunapanua sekta ya manufacturing ama miundo msingi na utengenezaji wa bidhaa nchini, na wala sio sana kutegemea pengine bidhaa za kutoka mataifa ya kigeni?
Hapo nadhania serikali hapa imepotea. Ule mtu ambaye ameweza kuadvise rais amepoteza kidogo, kwa sababu kuna vitu zingine uwezo kubadilisha tu overnight. Lazima kuna process, kuna utaratibu. Ile kitu ambayo inafanya hizi, unaona, ukiangalia, wacha tuangalie katika kitu kama nguo. Ukiangalia nguo za hapa Kenya na nguo ambazo zinatengenezwa China, nguo ambazo zinatengenezwa China, ukiangalia quality yake iko sawa na bei yake iko chini. Ukiangalia hapa Kenya, unaangalia quality chini iko chini na shida kubwa ni bei iko juu. So ile kitu lafaa serikali ifanye, lafaa kwanza ianzishe technical training, tukue na mafunzo, ndipo sasa tuweze kukompiti na hizo nchi zingine. Juu watu ukiniforce ninunue bidhaa za hapa ambazo quality yake iko chini na bei yake iko juu, sitaweza kununua. Alafu shida nyingine ambayo inatuumiza sana hapa Kenya, ukiangalia katika, unajua tunategemea sana bidhaa ambazo zinatoka nje. Hata ukifungua factory yako hapa, lazima raw material na kila kitu in most cases lazima itoke nje. Hata kama ni factory ya kutengeneza nguo, nakuta material inatoka nje. So ukiweka hizo bidhaa, ukiweka bei ya juu, ile kitu itafanyika ndiposa huyu mtu aweze kuuza bidhaa zake na aweze kutengeneza faida, lazima auze bei ya juu. Na ile kitu imeumiza hii serikali. Ile kitu nataka kusema ni kuwa ukiangalia process ya kuleta mzigo Kenya, mimi nimekuwa nikileta bidhaa kadhaa hapa Kenya na najua ile kitu inafanya bei ya vitu zinakuwa juu. Hata sana si ushuru, ni ile process. Unakuta unaleta mzigo wako, inaenda Kenya Port Authority. Kitoka Kenya Port Authority, hiyo mzigo inaenda kwa kitu inaitwa CFS. Hii CFS, unakuta mwenye hii CFS ni ama tajiri ndio wenye hii CFS. Unakuta wanaongea na wale maafisa wa KRA, wanawaambia hii mzigo process delay ndiposa tuweze kutengeneza pesa mingi kwa storage. Na hiyo ndio kitu inaleta shida. Unajua the moment umeweka hizi shida zote, hii mambo yote, hii expenses yote itaendea the common mwananchi. Ndiposa unaangalia zile nguo ama bidhaa ambazo zinatoka China ama zinatoka India ama zinatoka Turkey, zinapitia Mombasa. Zikishapitia Mombasa, zikuwe za Uganda ama za Kenya zinapitia Mombasa. Mtu wa Uganda ndiposa afikishe Uganda atalipa transport ya kutoka Mombasa paka Kampala. Na huyu mtu wa Kenya atachukua mzigo wake aanze kuuza. Lakini ukiangalia the end product, ule mtu wa Uganda ana bei yao inakuwa cheap paka watu wanatoka Kenya wanaenda kununua Uganda. Kwa sababu process ya Uganda ni rahisi sana. Serikali yetu iamini mtu wa kawaida. Ndio sababu ukienda Uganda unaleta mzigo yako, unatumia document, unalipa baadaye. Kenya kuna process imekuwa ngumu sana. Ndiposa vitu hapa ziko very expensive.
Naam, Alex, unapozungumzia kuhusu changamoto kama hizo kwamba mizigo inaekezwa kwa muda ambao ni zaidi ili kuokota hela zaidi.
Yes.
Ukiwa mtaalamu wa masuala ya kifedha na pengine kiuchumi, tatizo kama hilo linafaa kutatuliwa vipi?
Nakumbuka kuna wakati Mheshimiwa Musalia Mudavadi alikuwa anasimamia mambo ya fedha. Na KRA hiyo wakati kulikuwa na shida kubwa sana. Aliweza kuintroduce a system ambayo ilisaidia serikali kucollect ushuru mingi. Ile kitu ambayo nataka kuambia, Wakenya lazima tuweze kuiga mambo jinsi hizi countries zingine zinafanya. Kwa sababu hapa Kenya mambo mingi lazima ukuwe na cash, ukuwe na fedha. Serikali lazima i-trust mwananchi wa kawaida. Tukuwe na system whereby unaweza leta mzigo ikuje kwa godown yako, uanze kuuza, alafu ulipe baadaye. Na kukikuwa na vitu kama hizo utakuta si lazima ukuwe na pesa. Ukiangalia katika hizi nchi zinaendelea unakuta hata ukitaka kuagiza mzigo, kama uko na relationship mzuri na benki yako itakugaranti mzigo ikuje. Hujaweka pesa, hujaweka chochote. Na kule umeongea labda na huyo supplier umemwambia akupatie siku 90 ndipo uweze kumlipa. Unaweza kuta hiyo mzigo imekuja, imefika kwa duka yako, umeweza kuuza kabla wewe kutumia shilingi yako hata moja. Hii itakusaidia mwananchi wa kawaida aweze kupata hiyo mzigo kwa bei rahisi. Alafu kitu kingine lazima serikali, unajua saa zingine lazima ukiangalia katika nchi ya Tanzania bado wanafanya ile mambo ya chain of distribution whereby kama wewe ni manufacturer lazima mzigo wako ukimalizana nayo kimanufacture upeleke kwa distributors apeleke kwa stockist, ndipo iende kwa the last person ambaye ni consumer. Ukiangalia ukipeleka through this process inasaidia both the manufacturer, kwa sababu ukiangalia manufacturer ataweza kukua na advantage ya huyu distributor atamlipa cash, so atakuwa na pesa. Huyu distributor ataprovide warehouse pale pa kuweka mzigo, na yeye itaweza kusaidia watu wengi kupata kazi. Yes.
Tumshirikishe Robert kidogo na tuzungumzie athari za masuala ya uchumi katika taifa la Kenya, hasa kutokana na janga la COVID-19. Uchumi wa nchi umeonekana biashara mingi zimefungwa na hata zingine hata kuhakikisha kwamba shughuli zao zinakwenda chini kidogo. Na kunayo taswira ama dhamira kwamba serikali haijatenga pesa za kutosha kufufua uchumi. Kwa kimombo wanaita stimulus package. Sijui kama mtaalamu wa masuala ya ushuru na kifedha, mtazamo wako ni upi kuhusiana na kutengwa kwa fedha katika kufufua uchumi wa Kenya?
Asante sana kwa hilo swali. Kwa kweli serikali imetenga fedha mwaka uliopita na pia miaka miwili iliyopita imetenga fedha za kusaidia kufufua uchumi. Labda ile inaweza kuwa gap ni kuwa fedha ambazo zimetengwa hazifiki wengine, zinafikia wengine, lakini kuna wale bado bado wamebaki nje ya ile kuwa beneficiaries wa hiyo stimulus package. Ukiangalia la kwanza, nchi ya Kenya tuko na wakulima wengi, sekta ya ukulima ndio kubwa sana, lakini ukiangalia pia zile fedha ambazo tunaekeza kwa hii sekta ni kidogo sana. Na kwa hivyo unapata yale mapato ambayo yanafikia mkulima na wale wananchi wa kawaida, na ndio wengi, inakuwa kidogo. Ukiangalia kwa sasa hivi wakulima wanasema kwa bei ya bolea iko juu, bei ya malisho ya ng'ombe iko juu. Vitu zote ambazo mkulima anahitaji kuweza ile kupanda mimea, kulisha ng'ombe zake ndio aweze kupata hela zake, zinakuwa iko juu. Serikali tumesikia ikisema kuwa itaweza kupunguza bei ya hizi bidhaa. Tunatarajia hizi zitaweza kuangaliwa kwa hii bajeti, ndio mkulima aweze kununua bolea kwa bei ambayo anaweza, Ukiangalia ile malisho ya ng'ombe aweze kununua ndio aweze kupata mapato. Sababu ukiangalia hizo fedha zingine wanasema ni kupatia wananchi ndio waweze kufufua biashara, lakini tusipoangalia ile sekta kuu ya ukulima tutaacha watu wengi nje. Jambo lingine ambalo serikali pia inafaa kuangalia ni pia Alex venye amesema wale watu ambao wanaleta bidhaa kwa nchi wanapata mambo saa zingine kuingiza mizigo hapa inakuwa ngumu, lakini pia serikali kuna yale mipango imeweka. For instance tunasema kuna ile inakuanga authorized economic operator. Labda wananchi wengi hawajui kunayo ile namna ambavyo unaweza kuwa umepatiwa ruhusa ya kuingiza bidhaa bila kupitia ile process kubwa ya kuingiza bidhaa. Kama tume umeweza kuhakikisha na KRA that wewe umekuwa ukilipa ushuru wako inavyofaa na wakati unavyofaa. Hiyo inamaanisha kuwa ile process yote unaiondokea, bora tu unafanya declaration. So kunazo mipango zimefanywa, lakini labda serikali haijahamasisha kila mwanabiashara kuwa kuna ile njia ambayo wanaweza pata ya kuhakikisha mizigo inaingia haraka na wanaweza endelea na biashara.
Lakini nyinyi kama wataalam pengine mnafanya nini kuwashirikisha wachuuzi na wafanyabiashara kuhakikisha kwamba ndio wanafuata zile ngazi ambazo zimewekwa, lakini katika kufuata huko sheria ambazo zimewekwa pia hawatozi pesa zaidi kuliko hata faida wanazopata kwa biashara zao?
Ukweli kabisa. Na miaka miwili iliyopita najua kulikuwa na ule changamoto. Ukiangalia KRA walikuwa wasema watu wengi wanaleta bidhaa na walipi ushuru ambao unafaa, na hiyo ilikuwa inakandamiza wale ambao wanalipa ushuru kawaida. So wakajaribu kuleta ile system ya kujaribu kuharmonize, lakini ukiangalia the way hiyo mambo ilifanywa haikuwa kabisa. Ilikuwa kuna zile gaps ambazo hazikufiliwa. So sisi yale tunafanya kama sasa mimi mtaalamu, tunakuanga na sessions. Saa zingine tunaelezea wanabiashara ni vipi wanaweza ingiza mizigo zao hapa kwa nchi kwa njia rahisi na kuhakikisha zile additional cost kama hizo wanasema additional storage cost, ukiweka vitu sana zile kwa let's say kwa warehouse zinapunguka. So tunajaribu kuhamasisha, lakini kuna ile pia serikali ilikuwa na delay kubwa before iweze kusaidia mwananchi aweze kuelewa ni vipi utaleta mizigo zako na zisiweze kukaa huko sana ndio uweze kutozwa pesa zaidi kuliko ile faida unapata. So ni kuhamasisha wananchi ni moja, na pia serikali iweze kuongea na wananchi, kuweka kuwa wanajua what is happening, na pia ile sasa wanabiashara pia wao waweze kulipa ile ushuru, because hiyo imekuwa shida pia kuwa watu wanajaribu kuleta mizigo walipi ushuru kodi, ili hali wengine wanaleta na wanalipia kodi. So inakuwa ile unakuwa na unfair advantage. Kuna yule amelipa hajalipa, so wakileta bidhaa hapa Kenya mwenye hajalipa ataweza kuuza kwa bei kidogo. So inakuwa ile kubalance ndio serikali iko najaribu, lakini kulikuwa na zile changamoto pia.
Alex, katika mwaka tulioko wa bajeti wa mwaka 2021 mwaka 2022 serikali ilipania kupata trilioni 1.8 halmashauri ya ukusanyaji ushuru. Katika mwaka 2022 mwaka 2023 KRA inapania kuokota shilingi bilioni 2.4 trilioni 2.4 katika mwaka huu, lakini katika kuimarisha ukusanyaji wa ushuru bado kuna upungufu wa mabilioni ya pesa ambayo yanakaribia bilioni 846 katika bajeti, ikilinganishwa kwamba kuna masuala pengine ya ukopaji wa taifa la Kenya na kwamba deni letu bado liko katika trilioni 8.2. Ni vipi hasa ambapo tutahakikisha kwamba serikali inaleta usawa katika kumtoza mwananchi wa kawaida, katika kuongeza mapato ya kiushuru na katika kuhakikisha kwamba yale ambayo pesa ambazo serikali inaomba kutoka mataifa ya kigeni, mabenki za kidunia sio mingi sana?
Unajua ile shida kubwa sana ambayo serikali yetu iko nayo ni kuwa inakopa pesa. Ikisha kopa pesa inataka kujenga barabara, inataka kujenga vitu kadhaa, alafu inakuja naambia mwananchi wa kawaida ule ambaye anafanya biashara ndogo ndogo aweze kulipa. Huyo mwananchi hajahusika pahali popote na zile pesa ambazo zimekopwa. Unajua ukiangalia kwa finance, ukiangalia lafikwe kama pipeline. Ukikopa pesa lazima zipitie kwa hiyo pipeline, ambapo hiyo pipeline ni mwananchi. Lazima hizo pesa, kama kuna pesa zote ambazo zimeingia Kenya, lafaa ule mwanabiashara hata ule mdogo afeel hizo pesa kuna pesa zimeingia Kenya, lakini kama mkileta pesa mweke kwa barabara, mnaweza tengeneza nchi kuwe very beautiful, lakini watu hawana pesa. So ile kitu unajua, kama sasa ukiangalia ile kitu ambayo inafanyika ni kuwa, ukiangalia hii nchi yetu ya Kenya, ile kitu kubwa sana serikali imefanya, wale watu ambao wamepewa kazi ya kumarket country yetu hawajui kazi ambao wanafanya, kwa sababu kuna lot of potential katika nchi. Nataka kukupatia example moja katika nchi moja ambayo inaitwa Vietnam. Ukienda Vietnam utakuta kuwa China, wale wafanyikazi wa mkono, mshahara ilikuwa imeenda juu zaidi, mpaka walikuwa nalipwa same na 1,100 za Kenya, 100,000 ya Kenya. Lakini kitu ambacho Vietnam walifanya, Vietnamese walikuta watu wengi ambao wana kazi. So waliweza kwenda China, wakaambia wa Chinese, sisi kitu ambacho tunaweza fanya, tutasaidia hizi factory zenu, government italipia kila kitu, factory zenu zikuje kwetu, lakini 80% mwajiri watu wetu. Unajua kazi ya serikali si kutengeneza faida, ni kutengeneza maisha ya mwananchi wa kawaida ikae mzuri. So ile kitu iko, kama kunaweza kuwa na mtu anaweza market Kenya, kuna watu wengi, unajua kuna human resource ni asset kubwa sana. Kama kunaweza kuwa na vile unaweza market Kenya, tuseme kuna watu wengi Kenya na wanaweza fanya na pesa kidogo kama 30,000, 40,000 kwa mwezi. Kuna factory mingi sana zinaweza leta Kenya. Kama kuna vitu mingi ambazo zinaendelea, kuna activities mingi, haitakuwa ngumu kwa serikali kulipa hiyo deni. Sababu hizo pesa zikikuja hata kucollect ushuru, ukipitishia, unaona, ndiposa unakuta serikali, hata ukiangalia hata tenda zingine, biashara zingine, serikali ina compete na mwananchi wa kawaida. Alafu ukiangalia sana wale watu, ile kitu la serikali kuja na vitu na some incentives za kupatia wanabiashara. Tuseme kama mimi nimeweza kuajiri zaidi ya watu 100, serikali lazima iniheshimu hata kuliko ule mwanasiasa. Lafaa nipe. Ukienda kwa nchi zingine utakuta huyo mtu ambaye ameajiri watu wengi, hata gari yake number plate ni special, kwa sababu ni mtu ambaye anasaidia uchumi wa taifa. Unajua, ukiangalia katika serikali ambayo ilikuwa ya Mheshimiwa Mwai Kibaki, uangalia serikali ambayo ilitoka, unakuta hiyo system, ndio sababu nasikia inaitwa system. Hakuna mabadiliko, hakuna ule mtu ambaye anakuja kuongozi aseme tunataka tubadilisha mambo. Ndiposa hata ukiangalia katika uongozi wa Kenya unakuta kuwa hata kusipokuwa na kichwa bado mambo yanaendelea, ni kama system ishasetiwa. Lakini hakuna mtu anaweza jua vitu zinaweza badilika. Ndiposa ukiangalia katika mambo ya technology, vijana wetu wanaweza tengeneza pesa mingi sana kupitia hizo simu na mitandao wako nazo, lakini hawajui. Hakuna mtu wa kusaidia, kuna mtu wa kuelimisha. Kuna njia mingi. Ile kitu naweza ambia serikali, inaweza collect hizo pesa ambazo inataka, kama inaweza husisha mwananchi wa kawaida. Mwananchi wa kawaida, kama pesa zinakuja, wacha mwananchi afeel kuna pesa zimekuja. Na kama ukiangalia ile kitu ingine ambayo inatuumiza sisi kama wa Kenya, enda kwa nchi kama Dubai. Ukienda Dubai unakuta serikali inaheshimu wenyeji sana. Ukienda Dubai unakuta bei ya maji ya mwenyeji na wale foreigners si same. Mwenyeji analipa pesa kidogo. Ukienda Dubai ukikuta hata bei ya stima na bei ya bidhaa, unakuta hata taki wenyeji wanalipa pesa kidogo. Lakini ukikuja Kenya unakuta hata serikali tunaheshimu wazungu sana. Ukiona mtu na ngozi nyeupe unakuta hata vile anatritiwa ni different. Hata biashara zako unaweza kuta wana harass ule mama mboga naye ambaye ni Mkenya, lakini hao watu wengine. Lakini ukienda katika hizi nchi zingine unakuta wana treat. Lazima tusaidiwe, hata kama ni license, hata kama ni nini, tusaidie especially hawa mama ambao wanakuja na biashara ndogo ndogo, ndiposa wakaweze kuweza kuendelesha biashara zao, na tuweze kuweka incentives. Ukiweza kuajiri watu kufika 10 unapata kitu kama hii, kwa sababu ukiangalia biashara mingi katika nchi zote, labda Kenya 60% ya biashara ambazo zinaendelea nchi zote, 60% ni biashara za serikali. Kama wewe unataka kukua tajiri, lazima ufanye biashara na serikali, kwa serikali na control 60% ya biashara zote nchini. Hakuna vile unaweza tengeneza na wananchi wa kawaida.
Hizo biashara ambazo unasema kwamba serikali inachukua kipaumbele, yes, ni swala ambalo limeguswa sana na benki ya IMF. Yes. Na pengine nikimshirikisha Robert katika swali hili, shirika la IMF limetoa masharti makali Disemba iliyopita kwa taifa la Kenya kuhusiana na mikopo, na ikilinganisha kwamba kuna mkopo ambao unafaa kutolewa mwezi Juni. Benki ya IMF imesema kwamba Kenya sharti ihakikishe kwamba inapunguza hasa matumizi ya pesa kwa mipango ambao haileti faida. Kwa mtazamo wako, inawezekana kurudisha kwamba kiwango cha deni kihakikishwa kwamba hatuzidi na ile gap ama debt ceiling iliyowekwa? Kuna uwezekano kuhakikisha kwamba tunaomba kwa kuzingatia hiyo debt ceiling?
Asante. Kwa kweli kuna uwezekano wa kufikia hayo, na kuna ule mpangilio ambao serikali imekuwa ikijaribu kufuata, wanaita fiscal consolidation, ama ile kuimarisha sera za fedha, kuhakikisha pia matumizi ya pesa yanaendelea kulingana na mpangilio. La kwanza kuwa ni kuhakikisha kuwa matumizi ya yale ambayo yanatumika kwa ile recurrent expenditure inakuwa under control. Wanaweka ile msimamo la kusema kuwa let's say 35% haitumiki, hakuna asilimia more than 35% inatumika kulipa wale wafanyikazi wa serikali. Tukiweza kufanya hayo, then tuzingatie lingine ni kuwa deni litumike kufanya mambo ambalo limepangiwa. Kama umechukua deni kujenga barabara, kama umechukua deni kuweza kusaidia wakulima, litumike kwa hilo jambo. Makosa ni kutumia deni kufanya yale mambo ambayo hayajapangiwa. Sababu ukiangalia nchi zote duniani ziko na deni. Ukiangalia nchi kama Japan iko na 200% ya uchumi wao kama deni. Kenya tuko hatujafika hapo bado, 60% hivi. So kuna ile bado uwezekano that tunaweza chukua deni zaidi, bora tu litumike linavyofaa. Ukiangalia haya, serikali ya Jubilee imefanya mabarabara mingi. Kuna tarajiwa kuwa miundo msingi ambayo serikali imeweka itaweza create ile ajira kwa watu, biashara zitaweza kufunguka na watu wataweza kupata manufaa. Hiyo ndio matarajio ya serikali, lakini kuna vile pia kuwa tumetumia pesa mingi kwa miundo msingi, lakini bila bado uchuru haujaongezeka. Sababu kodi kama inaweza ongezeka, pesa zenye zimetumika tunaweza lipa. Lakini sasa kuongezeka kwa kodi hakuja kuwa kwa kile kiwango ambayo serikali inatarajia.
Alex, pengine swali langu la mwisho kwa sababu ya muda. Huu ni mwaka wa uchaguzi na kila mwaka bajeti inaposomwa tunashuhudia kwamba ushuru unaongezwa katika idara mbalimbali. Ukiwa ni mwaka wa kisiasa, masuala ya kuongezwa kwa ushuru na ikilinganisha kwamba wanasiasa wamejikita katika kumwahidi mwananchi wa kawaida kwamba gharama ya maisha italetwa chini. Mtazamo wako kuhusiana na hilo kwa kifupi?
Unajua kila mwaka maisha inazidi kwenda juu, lakini ile kitu ambayo naweza advise serikali ni kuwa ukiangalia bidhaa za kawaida, kama unajua sisi wa Kenya tunapenda ugali, ukiangalia mambo ya sukari na nini, zile bidhaa ambazo tunatumia, serikali ifai kuumiza mwananchi wa kawaida. Vitu kama pombe, sigara inaweza weka hata ×3 times, kwa sababu hizo ni vitu za kujiburudisha. Na ile jambo ingine ambayo nataka kuguzia kabla hata kwa kifupi ni kuwa ukiangalia sisi wanga tuna advise wanabiashara kama financial consultant, wanga tuna advise ukienda pale uchukue mkopo. Uweze ukachukua mkopo nuanze kuanzisha biashara yako, kujenga building, kufanya nini, na we expect utalipa. Chukua kama 20 to 25% kama ni kutengeneza duka yako, na the remaining 75% una make sure umeweka kwa stock na marketing na kila kitu ya biashara yako. Ndio serikali yetu iko na shida kubwa kwa sababu haina mwanabiashara ambao ana advice. Wanapata pesa kutoka nje. Hizo pesa wanataka kutumia the whole 100% kwa mambo ya kutengeneza, na wana expect wakuja sisi kwa mwananchi wa kawaida tukaweza kuwalipia zile vitu ambazo walifanya bila kutujumuisha katika zile shughuli zao. So mambo ya kusema mambo ya tax kwenda juu kuumiza mwananchi, ukikuta wanasiasa wengi, hata mimi saa zingine mimi ni mwanasiasa, lakini ukiangalia wanasiasa wengi, unajua mwanasiasa kazi yake ni kuuza promise. Wanauza promise. Mtu anakuja nitakuahidi, after hii unaahidi ile nyingine. Lakini unakuta saa zingine unaweza kuwa unatakia watu wako mambo mazuri, lakini pale mbele kuna shida.
Naam, asante sana Alex kwa kauli hizo. Mtazamaji, studioni nimekuwa nikiwashirikisha wataalam wa masuala ya fedha na masuala ya ushuru, wanafahamika kama Alex Kidake na Robert Maina. Wamekuwa wageni wetu leo kwenye sehemu ya Tamrini, ambapo maja yetu kuu hii leo tumekuwa tukijikita kwenye bajeti za mwaka 2022 mwaka 2023. Kwa sababu ya muda hatutaweza kuendeleana na mahojiano hayo. Mimi naitwa Gladys Mungai, naondoka studioni. Lesa Odingo amekuwa mfasiri wetu wa lugha ya ishara, na kuacha mikononi mwa Regina Manyara na Caroline Jenga wa kufahamisha mengi.